Hello, everyone. Nice to see you on my channel, Touching Stories. Today you will hear an amazing story that is based on real events. It's a drama that will be a very important lesson for everyone.
I work as a journalist. My profession implies acquaintances and meetings with many different people. Unwittingly, I have witnessed a wide variety of destinies. Among all the stories, the most striking example of human transformation is Anthony's story. I was just starting my career as a journalist at the city television station. Sometimes, on my way out of work, at the nearest intersection I would meet a guy in a wheelchair, both legs missing. Anthony was in his 20s, begging for a living. What was it about him that caught my eye in the flow of people? Anthony had an interesting conversation with every passerby who gave him a few pennies. I was curious about what this guy was talking to passers-by about. One day I approached him and put some money in his box. He thanked me and I smiled back. As I was about to leave, this guy stumped me with a question. "Girl, please tell me, how can a guy like me succeed in life? I really want to live a full life, and I have no idea how to do it in my case. But I believe that there are much more kind people in the world, and they can help me with their advice." I was a little taken aback by the surprise. I looked at the guy carefully and saw his eyes burning. His eyes definitely said that he was not going to give up to the difficulties of his fate. I don't remember what I said to him, but he thanked me and said that I was a very interesting person and that Anthony would be happy to be like me someday. Such a touching confession was also the first time in my life that I had ever heard it. For the next few days, this guy's question never left my mind. I really began to think how a person with very limited abilities can achieve success in our difficult world. Since that day, the issue of personal and professional realization of disabled people has become one of the topical issues at my work. I prepared many stories on this topic. I'd asked Anthony's question to many successful and influential people. All of them responded with some general phrases about the need not to give up, to look for opportunities, and to apply to some organizations. But I knew for a fact that Anthony didn't mean that. Anthony meant not just some kind of employment. He was striving for full personal realization, which even not all absolutely healthy people can cope with successfully. For some time, I made it a habit to approach Anthony, to slip him some money and tell him something that could be useful for him. But after a while, Anthony stopped showing up at the usual intersection. I looked for him in all parts of town, but I never saw him again. Life went on as usual. I was distracted by other issues, and the problems of the disabled gradually receded into the background. But every time I came across similar topics at work, I remembered Anthony, and it was really important for me to know how his fate turned out. The next time I met Anthony was when I had given up hope of finding him somewhere at a crossroads. I was invited to a business forum in a neighboring city. There were tons of entrepreneurs, bloggers, and journalists there. I gave a speech. The event went on with its dull program. Everyone was waiting for a coffee break, when you could finally find your acquaintances and chat with them on interesting topics. When I was pouring my coffee, an interesting-looking man came up to me. It was hard to tell his age. His eyes and face gave away a young man of about 30 to 35 years old. But his hair, evenly covered with grey, added a few extra years to his age. "Alice, what a nice meeting. You look beautiful," said the young man, smiling with a full mouth. I was doubly curious to know who this man was who knew my name before I met him. "Thank you. It's nice to meet you too. But unfortunately, I can't remember you. Perhaps you and I knew each other a long time ago. Please forgive me for my memory." "You don't have to apologize. It's really been a long time, almost 10 years. Back then, I was sitting in my wheelchair at a busy intersection begging. You're one of those rare people who were not indifferent to my inquisitive questions." I was pleasantly surprised to see Anthony so unexpectedly. We agreed to have dinner together after the event, and he agreed to gladly tell the whole story of his transformation. And yes, Anthony was no longer in a wheelchair. He walked leisurely on two legs with a cane in his hand. Over dinner, he told me some of his life story. Anthony was born into a family of ordinary laborers. When he was 8 years old, his parents were killed in an accident. Their house burned down and his parents were left inside the house. Anthony was rescued. After his parents' funeral, he was handed over to his paternal grandfather. The grandfather tried to give his grandson everything he could in his situation. Anthony went to school, studied well, and dreamed of a sports career. Therefore, the grandfather found a way to pay for his sports sections from his meager pension. When Anthony was finishing school, his grandfather became very ill. He felt that his end was near. Anthony took care of his seriously ill grandfather alone. Grandpa had another son, Barry, in addition to Anthony's late father. Barry lived in a neighboring town and very rarely visited his father. One day, Grandpa himself called Barry and asked him to come to visit him in the evening. That evening, he sat Barry and Anthony down in front of him and had an important conversation. It was about an inheritance. His grandfather had a large house with a well-kept garden, and Barry had no place of his own. He and his 3 teenage children rented part of the house and picked up occasional part-time jobs. Neither Barry nor his wife were looking for something stable, so his grandfather willed the house to Barry. Anthony inherited his used foreign car. "Anthony, I don't think you'll mind. You'll go to the big city, make your career, and hardly want to live in our village. That's why I'm bequeathing my car to you," as grandfather explained his decision. Anthony had had an interest in his grandfather's automobile from the beginning, especially since it was the only one in the area. That was why he was very happy about it. He did not worry about housing, because he was really going to go to the city and build his future there. A couple months later, his grandfather said goodbye to his life. Right after his funeral, Barry and his family moved into his grandfather's house and began living there. Anthony quickly noticed that not only Barry himself, but also his wife Sarah, was abusing alcohol. Anthony began to look forward to the end of school so he could get out of here sooner. But on one of those days, tragedy struck. Anthony was involved in an accident with his grandfather's car. He was taken to the hospital in a serious condition and miraculously survived, but his legs could not be saved. Both legs below the knee were badly crushed. When Anthony woke up after a long coma, he could not believe what had happened for a long time. What kind of sports career can you dream of if you are now bedridden? Anthony was released from the hospital and had nowhere to go but Barry's house. Of course, the family was not at all happy about this addition to the house. Before the tragedy, Sarah and Barry, as well as Anthony himself, were looking forward to the end of the school year and going to town from Anthony. Now everything had changed and everyone had a new reality to accept. Anthony realized that he had no time for misery and depression. Already 3 days after his discharge, early in the morning, he rolled his stroller towards the big highway that leads to the nearest metropolis. Every morning, he got up at 5 a.m. and drove his wheelchair to this highway to catch a hitchhiker to the city. There were more opportunities for beggars in town, so Anthony spontaneously settled near the TV station building. It was important for him not only to get money for living, but also to get moral support from people. It was even more important to get advice on what direction to take in life and where to look for opportunities for success. Anthony had no idea in what field there might be opportunities for people like him. But that question never left his mind for a minute. So to every person who gave him a few pennies, he asked his pressing question: "Can you tell me what I should do, and what I should do next to get my life together?" Admittedly, not every passerby understood Anthony's question. For example, one middle-aged woman tossed some coins into a box, but responded to Anthony's question in a very unexpected way. "What kind of opportunities? Man, you gotta get down off your ass. What fulfillment? What success?" In this day and age, healthy people with college degrees can't make it in life, and you sitting in a wheelchair dreaming of some kind of success. You should be thankful you're getting bread. Then quietly roll your wheels and be grateful for what you have. Anthony decided not to stay at the intersection any longer that day. He rolled his wheelchair to the nearest park and sat there until the next morning. He pondered the woman's words. No, he couldn't accept a miserable existence on the pennies tossed by random passers-by. He could hardly convince himself that the world did not rest on this unkind woman. The next day, he went back to his crossroads and continued his work. But there were some funny incidents. One day, Anthony passed by a group of young people. Girls and boys his age were having a lively argument. One of the girls slipped him some money. Anthony could not ask his usual question this time because he was in unbearable pain. These young people reminded him of his friends and of his old, healthy self. Until just a short time ago, he could have just as noisy a time with them and argue about everything on the selenium. As the girl tossed the money, Anthony stared silently at the ground. The noisy group walked past, stopped a few meters away, then walked back to Anthony in a friendly manner. "Hi, we're going to have a peaceful hike for the environment. After the hike, we're going to have a picnic outdoors. Would you like to join us? We'll take care of you," said one of the girls. Anthony agreed happily. One of the guys wheeled his wheelchair and they headed for the main street of the town. After a while, there were a lot more people. There were journalists with cameras. Police officers appeared, looking menacingly at the growing crowd of people. When there were quite a few people, one of the guys shouted to everyone that they would now head down this street to the nearest park. The crowd moved forward, chanting slogans about protecting nature and the need to stop using many current household items. There were calls for some foreigners to stop engaging in industry in this city. They demanded to close down these enterprises and stop destroying forests. Some shouted about the terrible pollution of the rivers around the city. When such slogans were shouted, the police became active. They approached those who were shouting from behind, twisted their arms, and dragged them to the police cars that were parked along the road. Anthony noticed that the most ardent protesters were the very guys who had invited him here. In a few minutes, they were all taken into police cars. There was no one to roll Anthony's wheelchair. The remaining people were quickly dispersing themselves. Anthony pulled off to the sidewalk, decided to rest a bit, and then leisurely returned to his workplace. At that moment, two policemen approached him and asked him what the purpose of his being here was. Anthony told it like it was. The policeman rolled his wheelchair to one of their cars and told him not to go anywhere. They went somewhere else. The first squad cars filled with troublemakers started to leave. Two cops returned about a half hour later. They checked Anthony's ID, asked a lot of questions. Anthony answered all the questions as they were, without lying. Then one of them lifted Anthony out of his wheelchair and put him in the police car. The other at that time folded the wheelchair and loaded it into the car. The police car sped off. In a few minutes, they were out of town. Anthony was afraid to ask where they were taking him. The policemen drove in silence, only occasionally answering their comrades on the radio. On the way, they turned off at a gas station. The car was stopped at the curb, and the two policemen got out. They returned a short time later with bags in their hands. They continued on their way. It was only after a while that Anthony realized that the policeman had brought him home, and in the bag they had packed a set of groceries. They dropped Anthony off outside his house, handed him the bag, and drove away in silence. Anthony was worried about his new comrades who had been taken off the street today. But in the evening, he learned from the local news that they had been released home that evening. Anthony liked this experience of actively interacting with a large number of people. The next day, he returned to the intersection again and continued his business. Now, he had more topics of conversation with passers-by. However, still not everyone was ready to listen to him and give him advice as he expected. On one such day, a man in substantial clothing dropped two large bills into Anthony's alms box. Anthony thanked him and couldn't help but ask his pressing question. The man was interested in the guy. He asked Anthony a counter question. What are you willing to do to succeed? Admittedly, Anthony had never thought about it before. Now he was seriously thinking about it. I'm not ready to hurt people. I'm not ready to do immoral things. I'm not ready to cheat or break the law. If it is necessary to do something within these limits, I am ready to give 100%, said Anthony. The man liked this answer very much. My name is Michael. What's your name? Anthony. You and I are namesakes, I guess. Listen, namesake, tomorrow at 2:00 p.m. I'll meet you at my office. Can you come to an address near here? You might have trouble getting into the building. There's no ramps. I'll alert security to help you get to my office. You call me beforehand, the man said and handed Anthony his card. It was clear from the business card that Michael was the head of a large company. Anthony was unaccountably pleased. In order not to miss tomorrow's important conversation, he decided not to go to his uncle's house in the village at all today. He stayed the night in the park again. The time was summertime, so his health was in no danger. The next day, Anthony rolled his baby carriage to the appointed place much ahead of time. He needed to call Michael, but how could he do that if he didn't even have a cell phone? He had to spend an hour looking for a kind person who could lend his cell phone for one call. That person turned out to be a nice girl. She was hurriedly leaving the building where the meeting with Michael was scheduled. Initially, Anthony was not going to ask for the girl's cell phone. He was embarrassed to do so. The girl was passing by when Anthony made his request to a young man his age, and the young man rudely responded and went on in his own direction. That girl heard the whole conversation. She stopped and approached Anthony. Do you need to make a phone call? Please, you can talk on my phone. She shoved her phone at him. Anthony was happy, but at the same second, he was shocked by the fact that he had no idea where and what buttons to press on the girl's phone. The girl realized it at once. Excuse me, let me help you dial. Anthony silently slipped the girl's business card. Oh, so you're here to see our Chief Michael? The girl asked in surprise. Yes, it seems to him, Anthony muttered. By this time, he was obviously nervous and depressed. In addition, he felt infinitely vulnerable in the girl's presence. In general, ever since Anthony became an invalid, he had shunned female company. It bothered him to think that any girl might think about how pathetic he was. What he hated most of all was having to put up with that feeling. So his number is in my phone, we'll call him now, the girl said, then clicked on her phone screen a couple times and shoved her phone back to Anthony. I dialed his number, you can talk to him. After a couple of beeps, a voice in the phone rang out. Yes, Selena, I'm listening. There's no ramps. I'll alert security to help you get to my office. You call me beforehand, the man said and handed Anthony his card. It was clear from the business card that Michael was the head of a large company. Anthony was unaccountably pleased. In order not to miss tomorrow's important conversation, he decided not to go to his uncle's house in the village at all today. He stayed the night in the park again. The time was summertime, so his health was in no danger. The next day, Anthony rolled his baby carriage to the appointed place much ahead of time. He needed to call Michael, but how could he do that if he didn't even have a cell phone? He had to spend an hour looking for a kind person who could lend his cell phone for one call. That person turned out to be a nice girl. She was hurriedly leaving the building where the meeting with Michael was scheduled. Initially, Anthony was not going to ask for the girl's cell phone. He was embarrassed to do so. The girl was passing by when Anthony made his request to a young man his age, and the young man rudely responded and went on in his own direction. That girl heard the whole conversation. She stopped and approached Anthony. Do you need to make a phone call? Please, you can talk on my phone. She shoved her phone at him. Anthony was happy, but at the same second he was shocked by the fact that he had no idea where and what buttons to press on the girl's phone. The girl realized it at once. "Excuse me, let me help you dial." Anthony silently slipped the girl's business card. "Oh, so you're here to see our chief, Michael?" The girl asked in surprise. "Yes, it seems to him," Anthony muttered. By this time, he was obviously nervous and depressed. In addition, he felt infinitely vulnerable in the girl's presence. In general, ever since Anthony became an invalid, he had shunned female company. It bothered him to think that any girl might think about how pathetic he was. What he hated most of all was having to put up with that feeling. "So his number is in my phone. We'll call him now," the girl said, then clicked on her phone screen a couple times and shoved her phone back to Anthony. "I dialed his number. You can talk to him." After a couple of beeps, a voice in the phone rang out. "Yes, Selena, I'm listening." "Michael, good afternoon. It's me, your namesake from the intersection. You told me to call ahead. I'm outside your building." "I got it, Anthony. Stay there. They'll be right with you," Michael said and hung up. "Thank you so much, Selena," said Anthony. "You're welcome." Selena smiled. "Is this your first time to see him?" Selena asked with interest. "Yeah, it's my first time here. Yesterday, I asked him for some job advice. He invited me to his office." "Well, then you should definitely expect the best, because our boss Michael is a very kind man. He helps a lot of people, and I think he'll do something for you. Anyway, I wish you good luck, and I have to run," said the girl and ran further on her business. A couple of minutes later, two huge guys came out of the business center and headed towards Anthony. They lifted Anthony's wheelchair, then brought it into the room, called the elevator, and took it to one of the high floors. Before Anthony's eyes was a real bustling business space, young people sitting at computers, commercials with Michael's face on a big screen, magazines on racks, half-whispered conversations, and smiling faces. Anthony was led to a supervisor. He expected to see Michael in a leather chair behind a huge walnut desk, but in fact, it looked different. There were many desks in the large room, separated from each other by small partitions. Michael appeared to be sitting in one corner of this room. He talked to Anthony for a while about his life and his plans. Then he offered him a job in manufacturing. The job was to record the arrival and departure times of workers from the production area. Michael took his time explaining that this information was needed for each employee's payroll. Anthony gladly agreed. They agreed to start the following Monday. That day was still 4 days away. To Anthony, that time seemed like an infinity. Immediately after finishing his conversation with Michael, Anthony hurried home to his uncle's village. In his head, he envisioned his bright future. However, his jubilation was interrupted by the unexpected events that awaited him at home. Despite the fact that today took a long time to catch a car to the village, Anthony came home in high spirits. He was met on the doorstep by a tipsy Uncle Barry. "Here comes our assistant uncle," sounding affectionate. Usually he was gnarly to Anthony or could come up with a couple of phrases only when necessary. Anthony understood perfectly well that it was such a silent signal that he was superfluous in this house. And his wife Sarah didn't talk to him about anything at all. But today it seemed different. "Oh, hi, Anthony," Sarah echoed her husband from the kitchen. Anthony entered the kitchen in his wheelchair and saw the usual scene: a bottle of vodka, a few cut glasses, and scraps of food. The children were playing outside as usual. Uncle Barry asked Anthony to the table. "You're a guy who's old enough. We can trust you with our most precious possessions. Sarah's parents invited us to stay with them for the summer. And here, there's a vegetable garden and an orchard. We need your hands to take care of the crops for the fall. Or we'll all have nothing to eat in the winter," said Uncle Barry like a man who cared about farming. "Anthony, how many times do you have to beg on the streets? And we are ashamed of you for walking the streets and begging. You'd better get out and do some gardening, and Mother Earth will feed us all." Sarah sounded in a way that was totally unlike her. In the last year and a half that they had moved into their grandfather's house, neither Anthony nor any of the neighbors had ever seen the family take care of the farm, much less the vegetable garden. And that small amount of vegetables and herbs were planted by Anthony's incredible labor. And that was because he expected that in the near future he would live in this house. But soon it became clear that his uncle and his wife would not let him stay here for long. And today, apparently, something had changed in their plans. You go ahead there, wrap up your business, and set yourself up to be the master of that house for the whole summer, said Uncle Barry. I actually got myself a good job. I need to get on with my life, not be a burden to you, said Anthony. What kind of a job is that? Barry's on a roll. People with education and brains can't find a decent job in our country. Where do you want to go? Barry poured himself a full glass of vodka and held it in his hand. They can promise you anything. You have no education. You have no experience. You have us, of course, but we're ordinary people too. So it's a simple matter to get you to work somewhere and then screw you for money. It's happening everywhere. My friend's niece also decided to make some money. She ended up being recruited into some obscene services. So then her mother had to run and pull her daughter out of this bondage. Who's going to run after you if you're in trouble? Sarah was being the most caring person in the world. I met the employer in person. He's a very big man. He has hundreds of subordinates. He said it was enough for me to sit at the computer and note the time each employee came and went, said Anthony. Well, if that's the case, of course. Uncle and Auntie are little people. You can ignore their requests. They did get you out of that selenium though, didn't they? They nursed you back to life, and they're still nursing you today. But none of that matters when there are other big people in the world. Come on, you get on with your life. Gratitude isn't about you. Uncle Barry has now turned to pressure. Anthony sat staring at one point. Why did this family have plans at this particular time? If he fell for their entreaties now, he would miss the opportunity to get a decent job. If he didn't do it now, his uncle and his wife wouldn't let it go. And Anthony really does depend on them for a lot of things. He can't even get soap off the shelf on his own. Although, until today, these people have not really bothered to take care of Anthony. Eventually, the entreaties smoothly devolved into a heated argument. Barry and Sarah, at some point, stopped choosing their expressions and even turned to outright threats. Anthony even suggested that they lock up the whole house and go wherever they were going. He promised to live the summer in the backyard, arriving in the evenings and leaving in the mornings. For some reason, the relatives insisted that he stay home all the time while they were away. Anthony ran out of patience when his uncle turned to accusations against his late father. You're already as selfish and stubborn as my brother was when he was alive. You couldn't get snow from him in winter either. You've got the same genes, and your nephew's gone the same way. Barry continued to resent him. If you don't do what we want now, we'll have to be kinder to you too, Sarah said. Anthony knew what she was talking about. He had heard the phrase that an invalid in the house was an unnecessary burden many times. In the end, it was agreed that Anthony was choosing his new job and a new place to live. Without waiting until morning, Sarah, staggering from alcohol, threw Anthony's clothes and personal belongings out the window. Uncle Barry remained seated at the table in the kitchen, unable to stop himself from airing his grievances against his long-dead brother. Barry and Sarah's children were watching everything that was going on. With great effort packing his belongings into his old gin bag, Anthony spent the night in the backyard of the house. The next morning, in his usual routine, he headed to the intersection. He needed to make some money to get by until he got his first paycheck. No matter how hard it was from such an unworthy act of his relatives, Anthony was glad in his heart that he had made a choice in favor of his own decision. He spent the remaining few nights in his favorite park. There was definitely difficulty with the most basic of needs. Anthony had always had a craving for cleanliness, but life on the streets didn't allow for proper cleanliness. He had made an extraordinary effort to draw water from the irrigation fountains in the park and wash his face with it. As for the cleanliness of his clothes, he had no solutions. On the eve of his first day of work, Anthony failed to fall asleep on a park bench. He was anxious and kept imagining himself as part of a large team. The prospect of receiving his fair wages gave him a lot of anticipation. On his first day of work, he rolled his wheelchair to Michael's production area well ahead of the start time. Fortunately for Anthony, it was relatively easy to get around in and around the building with a wheelchair. There were ramps at the entrance, and then a fully automatic transfer from elevator to elevator. Anthony's workstation was at the very entrance where the turnstile stood. He had his own large desk and a modern computer. Behind the desk was a comfortable upholstered chair. On the first day of work, Michael himself introduced Anthony to the staff. "May I have your attention, please? This is our new employee, Anthony. Please love, honor, and respect. He will be sitting at the timekeeping desk. If you see that Anthony is having any difficulty in performing his duties, may you be honored to help your fellow employee. It strengthens our team spirit, and it is very noble and humane," said Michael. After these phrases, Anthony got rid of unnecessary anxiety. The first week flew by unnoticed. Anthony began to gradually get to know all the members of the team. Most of them turned out to be very friendly and polite people, except for the two, Gold and Oliver. These guys were friends with each other and went out together all the time. They were even somewhat similar in their manners. Gold and Oliver had been skeptical of Anthony from day one, but for fear of Michael, they did not show their dislike. Anthony's workday started a little earlier than the other employees. In the evening, he would leave in his wheelchair to the park, spend the night there, clean himself up in the morning with water from the fountain, and be the first to arrive at work. The small amount of things he took from home, he kept at his workplace under his desk. He had a great deal of difficulty in elementary domestic matters, but none of that mattered to him now. He believed that he should not fill his head with petty domestic difficulties. He understood the most important thing. He needed to change something fundamental in his life, and everything else, including everyday matters, would work itself out within the framework of this fundamental change. At work, his favorite part was the morning. Every employee checked in with Anthony and waited for him to open the turnstile to enter the changing area. Food was produced here, so the controls were very strict. This morning had prepared him for an unexpected pleasant surprise. The workers at the control point had accumulated several people. Anthony tried to flag and pass everyone as quickly as possible. Each of them gave his name and surname. Anthony gave them the right to pass on. It was the turn of the next employee. Anthony did not take his eyes off the computer monitor, as he was still not well versed in this part of his job. "Next," said Anthony. A pleasant female voice sounded at the desk. Anthony looked up and saw in front of him the same girl who had kindly provided her cell phone to contact Michael about 2 weeks ago. Anthony had been glad then that such nice people worked here, but now it turned out he had forgotten about Selena. Do you work here too? Do you remember me? And did I ask you for the phone the other day?" Anthony seemed to lose control of himself and kept talking out of turn. "Yes, Anthony, I remember you. I even know we're colleagues now. The main thing is not to be afraid of anything, and you will succeed. If you've already marked me, I'll go now," said the girl with a charming smile and quickly left in one of the technical rooms. Anthony noticed that his mood had shifted in a completely different direction. It was as if he had been transported to another reality, where none of his problems existed, but only Selena with her divine smile and pleasant voice. The working days passed quietly and without much difficulty. Only Anthony did not leave the desire to keep Selena on the control point every morning as long as possible. To this end, Anthony made up different stories and jokes every night. In the mornings, he now strove to look as good as possible, to radiate cheerfulness and positivity. These feelings helped him not to emphasize his unbearably hard way of life and the incredible difficulties in maintaining himself. Another morning at Anthony's work. It didn't take long for Selena to show up. I wondered why the sun was shining so brightly today. It turns out it's because you, Selena, are complimenting its rays, said Anthony, leisurely making a mark in front of Selena's last name. That's so nice of you, thank you, Selena said, not sparing her charming smile. But these moments in Anthony's life lasted only a few seconds. Selena, not staying long, quickly disappeared into the bustle of the production process. Gradually, these poetic moments at the checkpoint began to be noticed by other employees of the company. It soon became clear that Anthony had some work to do. He was not good friends with the computer and often confused buttons. It was always Selena who helped him out at times like that. He began to dread the day when Selena wouldn't be there for him and he would be left completely helpless. It didn't take long for such a day to arrive either. Selena had the day off. Right in the middle of the work moment, when almost half of the production workers were being checked, Anthony again lost the page where he should mark each employee. It was foresight that saved him. He didn't get lost, took out a pen and paper, and continued to write down the arrival time of each employee on the paper. The next day, when Selena came to work, he told her what had happened. Selena complimented him on his resourcefulness. She unobtrusively offered to teach some computer lessons in her spare time. Anthony agreed to this gladly. For the first class, they carved out the lunch hour of the same day. It turned out that Selena still had a talent for teaching. She explained the basics of computer literacy in a very accessible and understandable way. At that moment, the lunch break ended and all the employees began to return to their workplaces. Gob, who had disliked Anthony from the beginning, was now much more attentive to his activities. "What are you guys doing here?" Gob asked, approaching Anthony's desk. "We decided to study a little. Anthony is learning everything quickly. I think soon he won't have any disruptions like today," said Selena. "Well, that's interesting, because Michael has very strict requirements for every employee. When I wanted to invite my friend, he wouldn't take him because he was not computer literate. And somehow people got in even without those magical skills. Or didn't the boss know that?" Gob asked. "Gob, Anthony Michael hired him. Don't worry, he knows the ins and outs of this guy, and will fill in some gaps in no time." Selena tried to smooth things over. Gob looked at both of them skeptically. At that moment, his inseparable friend Oliver came up to him. They whispered something to each other and headed for their desks. But Anthony sensed that these guys weren't going to let it go. A few minutes later, Gob was leisurely changing in the locker room, talking to his coworker Robert. Robert was a gnarly man. He answered all of Gob's questions briefly and was busy doing his own thing. Gob watched him carefully. When he stepped back to the large mirror near the closet, Gob discreetly took out Robert's wallet and put it on the shelf. Robert didn't notice anything. He hurriedly locked his closet and headed for his workplace. At the same time, at the other end of the production building, Oliver was tracking Anthony. He was darting from one end of the hallway to the other, pretending to be waiting impatiently for one of his coworkers. In reality, he was waiting for Anthony to step away from his desk so that he could realize his plan. When he realized that he was wasting his time here, he wrote to Gob about it. Gob promised to think of something and told him to keep waiting. He went to talk to another coworker, the new guy Evan. "Evan, hey, I have $1 million favor to ask of you." Gob spoke in a businesslike tone. "Hey, what's up?" Evan asked. He was also feeling the pressure from Gob and Oliver, and now that he'd talked about the request, Vanya's eyes lit up with hope that maybe he could get along with those guys. "You need to run right now to Anthony, who's sitting out front, and tell him that he's been called to accounting. It's an emergency," Gob said. Evan immediately ran to carry out Gob's command. Anthony wondered why he might have been called to the accounting department. He left his workplace and rolled his wheelchair toward the elevator. Oliver was just waiting for this moment. He walked over to Anthony's desk, looked around, and quickly pulled out an old gin bag with his belongings. While no one was around, Oliver headed for the stairs that lead to the dressing room. Oliver didn't make it to the bag in time. He saw Michael at the other end of the hall, who had come out of the administrative area and was on his way to production. In his haste, he had to throw his bag on the floor outside the front door and pretend to head for the dressing room. Oliver waited around the corner until Michael left on the elevator. Then he went back for the bag, retrieved it from the floor, and carried it toward the dressing room. Now he dialed Gob's number, briefly informed him that the bag was in hand, and sat down to wait for him here. Gob was still gone. Since Michael had gone straight to the production area, he couldn't run straight to the dressing room. Oliver sat like that for several minutes. When he heard the cleaning lady's footsteps, he left his bag in the dressing room and headed for his workplace, while he and Gob went back to the dressing room to drop Robert's stolen wallet into Anthony's bag. Anthony had time to discover it was missing. In that bag, he kept other valuables besides his clothes, documents, a pen and paper, and his books. So he immediately started searching for his belongings. Anthony was embarrassed to tell anyone that he kept his entire fortune here. Gob and Oliver realized that their cunning plan had not yet been successfully implemented. But Gob decided not to miss the opportunity to get back at Anthony and seized the opportunity. "Michael, remember I told you about my friend who wanted to work here too? You didn't hire him because he didn't know how to use a computer, did you?" Gob asked. "What do you mean by that?" Michael answered him. "And the new guy in the wheelchair, what's his name?" "Anthony, I think his name is. He doesn't know anything about computers. He writes everything down on paper, but he got here somehow. How'd he get so lucky?" Gob was still going on. "You should check his work more closely, because he's absent a lot. Anyone can come and go as they please," Oliver chimed in. Michael looked over and saw that Anthony was indeed absent. Anthony was frantically searching for his gin bag. The sound of a wheelchair being moved was heard by the cleaning lady, and she asked what he was doing in the tech area. Anthony told her about the loss of his gin bag. "You should have asked. I saw how your companions moved their personal belongings into the check room. Come on, I'll show you," said the cleaning lady and rolled his wheelchair into the dressing room. Anthony's gin bag was indeed there. "How? How did she get here?" asked Anthony with surprise. "Where's it supposed to go?" The cleaning lady's got her hands full. "Generally, everyone keeps their personal belongings here, but yours appeared here only today, and that was brought by your comrades. Maybe you just didn't know it." "Oh, right. I didn't know that. Now I will," Anthony said and felt embarrassed for his panic. In fact, he really didn't know that there was a special place to store his things and that it was much safer there. True, he had forgotten to specify who the kind companions were who had moved his things here. After receiving a few lessons from Selena, Anthony felt not only great love, but also universal gratitude towards her. He really wanted to do something nice for her in return. He began to look forward to the end of the month, when he would finally receive his first paycheck and he would be able to make a gift to Selena. But until that day, Anthony was once again faced with a series of challenges. During this time, Anthony learned that Selena's mom also worked at this company as an accountant. Anthony thought that it would not be unreasonable to get acquainted with Selena's mother and establish a good relationship with her. But this woman very rarely appeared at the production area. Anthony still tried to come to work first, and no one was ahead of him. He was still frantic about problems with his work computer. On one such day, the computer unexpectedly failed him again. When he turned it on, it ran completely incomprehensible programs and did not respond to Anthony's attempts to do anything about it. Again, it all happened on the day Selena was away. He had to get a pen and paper out again and write down the times the employees visited. Gob and Oliver weren't going to let that go. "Anthony, I don't think being a computer buddy is your thing. You should do something simple, where you don't have to use your brain," Gob said and laughed. "You're going to break that computer so soon, and then you'll spend half your life working off the cost of it," Oliver echoed him. Anthony was really scared. He dialed Selena's number and told her that something was wrong with his computer again. Selena advised him to find Max, the system administrator, in the administrative area and ask him to help him. Anthony had to go to great lengths to find Max. He came and identified the problem at a glance. "Well, buddy, I guess you've been playing games in the workplace. Your computer is infected with a virus. Such problematic viruses can only be picked up on gaming sites," said Max. "But I don't even know how to play on a computer," Anthony muttered. "Don't get too carried away. There's a camera behind you." Max pointed to a corner of the ceiling right behind Anthony's back. This was another revelation for Anthony. He really didn't realize that his every action was being watched. On the other hand, it gave him hope to prove his innocence. On one such challenging day, Anthony is approached by one of his co-workers whom he doesn't yet know. "So, how's it going? How's work going?" asked the young man. "Thank you, I'm settling in," replied Anthony. "Have you made any friends here?" the unfamiliar colleague asked. Anthony didn't understand the question, but he answered honestly. "My best friends here so far are Selena and Michael. With the other co-workers, we're still in a formal relationship. You should be more careful anyway. My name's Billy, and I'm a security guard here. I know every move every employee makes here, so don't ignore what I say." Billy looked at Anthony enigmatically and slowly went back to his workplace. Already seated behind several large screens, Billy's security guard called the production area and asked the two employees to report to the security office immediately. Gob and Oliver were somewhat surprised, but "Don't lie, the camera in the hallway records everything with sound. You hatched a plan yesterday to frame the new guy in the wheelchair," said Billy. "Either you tell it like it is now, or the sound recording will serve as evidence of your theft in court." Oliver was more than a little frightened. He recounted the plan that Gob had suggested yesterday without much difficulty on Billy's part. Afterward, Billy gave a warning and let Oliver go. He then asked Gob to come in. "When are you gonna put Robert's wallet back where it belongs?" Billy's guard turned to Gob. "There was a misunderstanding, because we have very similar wallets, and I think I got my shelf mixed up with Robert's. I'll be sure to give him his wallet back as soon as I see him." He was sure that he had covered the camera well enough with his back, and his actions would not be seen by the guards. As it turned out, it was impossible to hide anything from Billy. "No, either you go and hand over your wallet right now, or Michael will see the tape of you stealing it. Then you'll be summarily fired. That's the best option, unless Robert decides to file a police report on you," said Billy's security guard. Billy this time decided to turn a blind eye to the stupidity of the young boys. But their devious plans didn't end there. Billy guessed it too, so he decided to warn Anthony. The end of the month was approaching. On one such day, a pleasant middle-aged woman approached Anthony. "Anthony, is that you? I need a monthly time schedule for payroll," said the woman. Anthony turned the monitor of his computer and put a stack of papers next to it, where he wrote down the schedule by hand. "What kind of joke is this?" the woman exclaimed. "Do I have to make a monthly schedule myself? I won't accept it like this. You have exactly 2 hours to enter all these papers on the computer and submit them to me," the woman said and left. Anthony began the work process. No matter how hard he tried, he realized that he was running out of time. In his haste, he pressed the wrong button again, and again his work stalled. While he was trying to fix the problem, the bookkeeper came down to him again and demanded the schedule at the ready. "Jessica, so our co-worker crashes this computer every day. Maybe it makes sense for him to actually work manually." Gob showed up from somewhere and started commenting on everything. How does it break? I thought he didn't enter the data because of a network glitch. Jessica waved her hands. You can ask your daughter, Selena, how many times she's helped him out. Last time, Max spent half a day digging around to get his computer up and running. I think it's already broken. Oliver ended up here with his comment too. Well, if the computer does seem broken, Anthony will work it out of his paycheck, said Jessica. Yeah, 3 months without a paycheck, and he could close his damage to the company. Anthony and Oliver chuckled among themselves. The time was approaching evening, and Anthony had not yet finished making the time schedule. The employees, who were preparing to receive their paychecks today, began to whisper among themselves. Some of them managed to go up to the accounting department and find out the reason for the delayed paycheck. Of course, the accounting department said that the paycheck was delayed because of Anthony's slowness and irresponsibility. Anthony decided to stay the night and finalize the schedule. During this time, Gob and Oliver stood near his workplace and told each employee the reason for the delayed paycheck. Colleagues who had recently been courteous had instantly turned into embittered and violent people. Someone even threatened to complain to Michael and ask him to fire Anthony for not doing his job. Seeing all this commotion, Selena came to Anthony's rescue again. She too stayed late after work and helped to finalize the work schedule. My mom at work is only so stern, said Selena. She's actually a very kind person. Don't worry about the computer and all that stuff about you breaking it and working it off your paycheck. It's a common practice around here to keep the employees on their toes. Selena tried to calm Anthony down. After finishing the chart, Selena decided to take it with her and give it to her mother at home. Don't worry, everyone will get their paychecks by lunchtime tomorrow and forget everything. And you should be careful with your computer, because someone has put viruses on it, right? Selena said lastly. Indeed, Anthony's co-workers stopped hissing and getting angry at him after they received their paychecks. After lunch, Michael called Anthony over to him. He said that he had noticed Anthony's absence from the workplace several times and asked why that was the case. Anthony had to honestly tell the reasons for each time he had been excused from the workplace. He was now unable to hide the fact that he was actually living on the streets and had to deal with domestic issues at the workplace at times. Anthony revealed that he had to leave home the day he made the choice to take the job. Michael listened to everything carefully and felt sorry for the guy. He ordered that he was given a small corner in one of the technical rooms. Now Anthony lived at work. The conditions were much better than on the street, but he was terribly ashamed of it. But it was not the biggest problem in his life at that moment. All the hardships and problems were forgotten in the blink of an eye when Anthony remembered Selena. He never ceased to wonder how such a beautiful girl could be so kind and intelligent. Could it be that she had a crush on him too? Anthony was afraid to think about it, because he did not believe in the reciprocity of his feelings. What kind of healthy, beautiful and young girl could love a wheelchair-bound invalid and absolutely unsettled in life? These thoughts made him put his declaration of love for Selena on hold for a while. One of these days, as usual after the end of the working day, all the employees hurriedly went home. Gob and Oliver were among the first to leave. Today, Gob was in an upbeat mood. He left the workplace first and returned a few minutes later, but with a beautiful bouquet in his hands. Anthony didn't pay attention to such details at first, but Gob had gotten his way. Anthony, is Selena out yet or not? Gob asked. Not yet. Do you think she'll like the bouquet? Gob lifted the bouquet in front of Anthony's eyes and began to show all sides. Well, the bouquet was indeed magnificent. Is it for Selena? Anthony found himself at a loss. Yeah, who else would it be for? Not for you. Selena's the best-looking girl here. I've got big plans for her, and I hope I get lucky tonight, Gob said, showing off his unpleasant, boorish smile. Anthony felt like he'd been splashed with cold water. How could it be? Selena was so refined, so well-mannered and quiet. This gob is completely out of her league. He's boorish, rude, and seems completely incapable of deep feelings. Anthony didn't want to believe that. He hoped that Selena herself realized that this guy was no match for her and would soon fight back against this boorish gob. A couple minutes later, Selena came out with a flying gait. She smiled charmingly at Anthony as usual and wished him a good evening. And after a few steps, she threw herself into the arms of that clumsy gob. After hugging, the couple got into Oliver's car and drove off to an unknown destination. Anthony lost pace from that day forward. Several months had passed. Anthony had become quite familiar with his job and was already able to instruct others, and I get it, you don't have to justify yourself. I'm sorry if I was inappropriate with my feelings. There was an uneasy pause. Selena had a really hard time choosing phrases so as not to offend Anthony, and at the same time not to feed him false hopes. Anthony realized this too, and managed to turn the conversation to other topics. They never returned to the subject again. Anthony's goal now was to forget this girl. He didn't want to live an illusion anymore. True, it was difficult to do this when Selena was constantly in front of his eyes. Selena, in turn, also tried to somehow smooth over this difficult issue. She knew that Anthony was always reading books. A couple days after the conversation at the coffee shop, she gave him a stack of new books. They were all motivational in nature. Anthony liked this gift very much. The focus of his attention gradually began to shift from Selena and Gob to himself. Suddenly he remembered that he knew how to use the internet. Selena had taught him, especially now he had a modern cell phone that could transmit everything in the world. On one of these days, he has a dream. In this dream, he sees himself as a little boy. Anthony's parents were alive and by his side. Anthony sits between them in a green clearing. There is a thick layer of snow lying around, but it quickly begins to melt under the rays of the bright sun. Anthony and his parents are trying to make out a flock of birds flying through the sky. Anthony is sure that these birds will bring something important to him. The flock suddenly begins to land not far from his family. Screams could clearly be heard. Anthony could even make out their coloring. The birds have now completely surrounded him. Anthony keeps waiting for them to drop off their gift, but instead they swirl around his parents and take them both into the sky. Anthony screams after them, cries, and runs to the edge of a high cliff. But the pack has already disappeared behind the mountains without a trace. Anthony realizes he is lost. He finds himself in a completely unfamiliar area. Only in the distance, he sees a crowd of hard-working people. Now he decides to get to these people and ask for help. But suddenly he finds himself as he is now without both legs, and the wheelchair is not around. So Anthony crawls towards the people. Suddenly someone in the crowd comes running towards him. He's holding a small piece of paper in his hand. The unknown man hands Anthony this small paper and immediately disappears. Along with him, the crowd of working people has disappeared. Anthony unfolds the small folded paper and sees the address of a certain website. Toward morning, he woke up in a cold sweat. The dream was so vivid that he remained impressed for a long time. The address of the webpage remained clearly in his memory. The first thing he did in the morning was to type in the address, and he was truly amazed. It was the website of a company that makes prosthetic limbs for the disabled. Anthony connected this dream with his impressions from motivational books. One of them said that if the universe heard you, it would definitely signal you to take action. This was exactly the case. Now he has a new dream and a new goal to earn money for prosthetics. Yes, it's a lot of money. Yes, he will have to work hard to learn to walk on these prostheses, but he will live a full life. The next day, Anthony decided to meet with Michael. He told him that he had set new goals for himself and asked what he needed to do to increase his salary. Michael, as usual, did not disappoint Anthony. He helped compile a long list of training courses, skills, and abilities that would help Anthony reach a new level of competence at his job in the near future. So Anthony went to take a short accounting course. Of course, new knowledge, especially professional knowledge, was given to him much more difficult than computer literacy in the hands of the lovely Selena. But Anthony decided not to give up. It is still difficult for him to get to his place of study. It was still difficult to cope with elementary tasks, but he had no intention of stopping. Working days continued in the usual rhythm. Anthony could not forget Selena. She is constantly in front of his eyes. The day begins with a meeting with her, ends by seeing her home with a look. She is increasingly leaving with God. God has long noticed that Anthony is partial to her and does not miss any opportunity to demonstrate that Selena belongs to him. He's also nice to Jessica the accountant, his potential mother-in-law, and he's been doing quite well in that area. Jessica, who used to be good to Anthony, had become cold to him lately. Anthony didn't notice it right away. That day, out of habit, he was in a hurry to turn in his timesheet for the month. He took the elevator to Jessica's office and knocked. "Jessica, good morning. I'm all set. Come on in." Anthony rolled his wheelchair with great difficulty to the accountant's desk and put the papers on the table. Jessica first looked at the papers, then glanced at Anthony. "What's the rush? You're always in a hurry. You have a strong desire to please everyone, and it's going to play tricks on you. I didn't tell you before, but you have 100 mistakes in every document." Jessica said it with undisguised irritation. "What about the mistakes? Why didn't you tell me right away?" Anthony was surprised. "Because I've been fixing everything myself. I thought you'd start getting into your work. I hoped you'd be good at it, but you're not." "Anthony, it's really hard for you. Maybe you should think about doing something else. I've heard you can make a good living shining shoes in the underpass. I think you wouldn't have any problems there," said Jessica. Anthony staggered back. He felt like he'd been splashed with cold water again. Jessica had always supported and praised him before. But what had happened now? Why had she decided to hurt him so badly, so bluntly suggesting that the best life for him was the street? Anthony realized that it wasn't about the papers at all. So he didn't argue, left the papers on the desk, and rolled his wheelchair back to his workplace. After such hard days at work, Anthony usually distracts himself with his motivational books. They allow him to paint in his head a whole new life where he is a complete and accomplished person. Only within this image can Anthony dream of the most important, loving, and beloved loved ones. He is sure that in his current position, no one needs him. Indeed, every person in his life, sooner or later by his actions, makes this clear. The exception so far is Michael, and Selena, of course. Although she could not love Anthony, but she did not deprive him of her friendly support. Anthony realizes that even these people cannot endlessly provide him with their care and understanding. The worst part is, someday these people might also hint that Anthony is giving them trouble. Then he will definitely lose meaning and direction in his life. The new work week started with positive news for the team. Everyone was discussing the news that God proposed to Selena. She accepted his proposal, and they scheduled the wedding in the coming days. And at lunchtime, Gob officially made an announcement to the whole team. They have decided to play a modest wedding for the closest people, then plans to organize a gala dinner for all colleagues in the company canteen. After that, he and Selena have a plan to start their joint vacation, which they will spend in Egypt on a wedding trip. Everyone applauded and congratulated the newlyweds. Anthony couldn't do that. It was too painful for him. He realized that the darkest days awaited him at work. Starting the next day, the hot topic for the team was the topic of a gift for the newlyweds. The next morning, when all the employees crowded around Anthony's desk and to mark their names, Gob attracted the crowd's attention with his statement. "We promised we'd have a wedding surrounded by the people closest to us. Anthony, you're like a friend of the family. "Here's an invitation for two, and you can bring a friend," Gob said, and put the beautiful wrapping on the table. It was an additional blow to Anthony. He didn't go to the wedding, of course. That day, when Gob and Selena were having a tea party for the whole staff, he made up a false excuse to take a couple of hours off from work. He spent that time in the park. Selena was well aware of all this. Gob also noticed Anthony's fidgeting and continued to act in the same way. In the evening, when all the employees were going home, Jessica had a conversation with Anthony. "You were invited to the wedding, but you didn't show up. You weren't at the tea party today either, and Selena was looking for you." "Yes, I've been a bit busy," Anthony muttered. "Yeah, you've been getting a lot of business lately." Jessica took another jab for a reason unknown to Anthony. As usual, Gob was right there. "Jessica, I told you our Anthony has a career dream. He's working day and night, aiming for the top job. Look at him, studying accounting, and he's already sucking up to you," Gob said, pointing to the stack of books on Anthony's desk. Now Anthony's mind was making sense of everything. He remembered when Gob was always trying to see what he was studying at his desk all day. Apparently, Gob had gotten there and peeked at the textbooks. He decided to use that against Anthony and made up a story about him going straight for Jessica's accountant's job. At the same time, Gob used it as an excuse to woo his potential mother-in-law. Anthony was devastated by the meanness. The only true option in his case was not to react to all these attacks. He himself did not notice that he had already learned a little to withstand such situations. But the fact that people can do you evil in advance, even when you do not intend anything against them, was difficult to digest. Anthony had to go through this lesson alone. The next morning, all the production workers were surprised by Anthony's absence from the workplace. In the last 6 months since he had gotten a job here, there hadn't been a single day that Anthony hadn't and sat at his desk the very first. Billy's security guard asked everyone to self-check in on paper and leave everything on the desk. After that, Billy rushed to the technical room, where Anthony lived in one corner. He was lying in bed almost unconscious and did not react to Billy's attempts to wake him up. "Anthony, goddammit. Michael's gonna be at work any minute now. If he catches you drunk, you're out of here like a bullet. He won't even care that you're an invalid. Wake up." When Billy realized that his attempts were futile, he simply locked the door from the outside and left. Billy told all the curious people that Anthony felt sick and decided to drive his wheelchair to the drugstore to get some medicine. It was not long before Billy regretted that such an explanation was inappropriate. His version did not stand up to any criticism. It was getting close to lunchtime, and Anthony wasn't going to open his eyes. Billy was already annoyed beyond belief. "Anthony, are you an idiot? Do you realize you're setting me up? Now, get the hell up and go back to your desk. Michael's been here a long time. He could be wondering about you at any moment." Billy shook Anthony's woozy body. Having never tasted alcohol before, Anthony decided to find solace in a bottle after yesterday's events. He certainly succeeded in venting his emotions. He sat in the park and sobbed loudly until the police noticed him. They approached him and were about to take him to the police station for violation of public order. But then, out of nowhere, an unknown middle-aged woman appeared. She started cursing Anthony. "There you are. As soon as I went to get bread, those damned comrades dragged him out into the street." A woman acquaintance further told the police that it was her son, that he had recently been in a car accident, had lost both his legs, and that he was now in a deep depression. She took all the blame, saying that she had allowed her son to spend some time in the company of his companions, and those unreasonable had given him alcohol. The woman begged the police not to take her son away and promised that it would not happen again. The policeman believed the woman's words and drove away. The woman then asked who he was and what he was doing here. Anthony told his story. The now unfamiliar woman cried with him. Lastly, He asked her to help roll the stroller to his work. The unfamiliar woman escorted Anthony out. Lily's security guard, seeing Anthony drunk, also wanted to send him away, but he was aware of all the drama going on in the group with Anthony's participation. So he let the drunken invalid sleep in his corner, and now he can't wake him up. Later, Michael was really interested in where Anthony was walking around. Billy kept saying that he had gone to the drugstore. The time was nearing evening when Anthony opened his eyes with great difficulty and looked at his watch. And then he remembered his work, but the door was locked. He started banging on the door with all his might. Billy's security guard, whose workplace was at the other end of the building, couldn't hear the banging. Michael, however, was passing by. He went to the door, reached for the handle, and asked, "Anthony, what kind of trick is that? Who locked you in here? We've been waiting all day for you." "I'm sorry, Michael. I promise it won't happen again. I swear to you by all the saints. I showed weakness yesterday, but it was the first and last time." Michael seemed to realize what had happened and called Billy's security guard. Billy by this time was ready to confess that he had been misleading everyone all day and lying to save Anthony. Michael later sat Anthony and Billy down in his office and asked what punishment they thought would be fair for their transgression. They both made excuses and repented, but Michael had never forgiven his employees for drinking on the job, and for untruthfulness, he simply went into a rage and always fired employees without a second thought. And this time, despite all other circumstances, he did not reconsider his principles. Thus, Anthony and Billy found themselves unemployed in a matter of minutes. Anthony became most resentful of Billy. He practically begged Michael to keep Billy and fire him, but he was adamant. By evening, they had both received their paychecks from Jessica and were putting their mugs in their travel bags. "Billy, I feel terrible about what happened. I don't even know how to make it up to you. You did the manly thing to me, and it let you down." Anthony was now racked with guilt. "Come on, it's no big deal. I was thinking of quitting myself. They offered me a good job the other day, and I was hesitant. Maybe I belong in the new place. We'll see how things play out." Billy said in a calm tone, "I'm all right. I've got my hands and feet. I live with my mother. She feeds me, does my laundry, and cleans up. What are you gonna do?" Billy asked. "I'll probably go to the park. Where else would I go?" said Anthony. "How can you live on the street? Come to my place. My mother is kind. She won't kick you out. You don't plan to live like this all your life, do you? Finish your studies, get a new job, and figure out a place to live," Billy said. Anthony had his doubts. He is very afraid of making other people uncomfortable. After he was fired from his job, he felt doubly bad. Even though he felt gratitude to a person, he could show himself in a moment of weakness. But he had already promised 1,000 times that he would never drink alcohol again under any circumstances. Billy's mother received Anthony without much joy. Lucy, in spite of her advanced age, worked from morning till evening, in between managing to create a cozy home and feed her grown-up son Billy. At dinner, she inquired about Anthony's future plans. He frankly admitted that he didn't see any job prospects until he finished his accounting course. Lucy even praised him for his determination, but between phrases she made it clear that strangers were not particularly happy about such a burden in the house as Anthony's limited movement. Anthony realized that very soon he would have to deal with housing problems again. And the time was already fall. The nights in the park were not as comfortable as in summer. In the morning, a rational idea came to him. He decided to offer Lucy a certain amount of money for temporary residence in their apartment. Lucy did not refuse such an offer and gave him a separate crib in Billy's room. A few days later, Billy actually went to a new place where he was offered a job. He was taken there without any problems. Billy liked the new job. He still didn't have to work hard, but the salary was much higher. Anthony continued to go to school. When there was not much left before graduation, Anthony suddenly realized that he did not communicate with his classmates. They are very intelligent, evolved and determined people. Plus, they must be just as driven as Anthony. From the first day, each of them tries to support Anthony in every way possible, helping him to get to and from the classroom. A close acquaintance with any of them has not yet taken place due to Anthony's fixation on himself. And so he finally got to talk to some of them today. Angelica, a young girl, works as a secretary and is also aiming for growth in her company. Alexander, who looks to be in his early 60s, turned out to be the head of his own company. Leslie said that she was tired of working as a school teacher and decided to change her field of activity. Indeed, everyone turned out to be very interesting people. If there was free time after school, Anthony did not hurry home. He drove his wheelchair away from the place of study to crowded places and continued begging to cover his current expenses. He still asked passers-by about the secrets of success in life. He was surprised to find that he now spoke to people in a slightly different tone. Whereas before he had felt deeply depressed, self-pitying, and hopeless, he could now talk about himself more calmly. What he enjoyed most was telling people that he was studying to be an accountant, that he had a goal to put himself on his feet, literally. Some young people even had time to take pictures with him or video the whole thing. All in all, life had found a certain stability. On one of these days, Billy was also happy. He announced that he had received his first increased salary and could afford a small party in a small circle, meaning Anthony's company. Anthony did not attach much importance to the suggestion. Billy promised to return to the subject when Lucy went away to the country for a couple of days the other day. And that day didn't take long to arrive. When Anthony arrived in the evening with a decent part-time job, Billy had already set a fancy bachelor's table and was waiting for him. Anthony remembered in his promise to never take alcohol in his mouth again. Billy had talked him into it for a long time, but Anthony was resistant to persuasion. By the time passed midnight, Billy was almost drunk. He occasionally spouted insults at Anthony, but overall their party was fun. At that moment, Billy had a brilliant idea. "Look, why are we bored alone together? We could brighten up the evening with some lovely ladies, don't you think?" said Billy, smiling enigmatically. "Well, if the lovely ladies won't be disappointed by the presence of a special person like me, I don't mind. And I won't rat on Lucy about you," Anthony said. Billy went out on the balcony and dialed the phone number of the beautiful ladies he knew, whom he periodically visited. A few minutes later, there was a knock on the door, and Billy went to open the door. Ariana and Samantha turned out to be quite pleasant girls. They were relaxed, happy to drink and laugh at Billy's anecdotes. After a while, one of them suggested a disco. But after a few minutes, the neighbors knocked on the door and asked for silence. The disco was cancelled, and Billy was already tired. He offered Samantha and Anthony to spend the night in the living room, while he went to his room with Ariana. Anthony offered Samantha a place on the couch, and he himself laid the mattress on the floor. A philosophical conversation ensued between them. "Even though I'm not doing my best work right now, I wouldn't want to lose faith in myself. I convince myself every day that it's only temporary. I have to pay for my studies at any cost. I have no one to take care of me, no parents. So in a way, you and I are alike." Samantha talked about her difficult fate. "I'm not judging you. Everyone makes their own choices. You get paid money to entertain single men. It's not the worst thing a man can do. The main thing is that you be careful, choose your people, and always look for an opportunity to leave this business as soon as possible." Anthony tried to support the girl. In the morning, when Anthony woke up, no one was in the apartment. He called Billy and found out that he had been at work for a long time. There was no trace of last night's fun in the kitchen. Billy, before leaving for work, had managed to wash all the dishes, put everything in its place, and take out the trash. By the time Lucy arrived, the apartment was in perfect order. but it was only an appearance. Anthony noticed that over the past few days, Lucy had become cold to him. He couldn't understand the reason, but it didn't take the woman long to puzzle it out. That evening at dinner, she asked, "I see." Lucy was in no hurry to leave. She invited him to breakfast and was the first to start the conversation. "Anthony, I realize you're going through a difficult time. There's all sorts of things in life. There's need, there's hardship. I wonder if you could tell me more about what happened in my absence." Anthony understood what he was talking about. "Lucy, I'm very sorry that your personal valuables were lost. I can tell you one thing for sure. It was definitely not my fault." Anthony hurried to get out of this unpleasant conversation as quickly as possible and still persuade Billy to tell the truth. Lucy, of course, was not satisfied with the answer, but Anthony could not change Billy's mind either. "Don't worry, Anthony. Mother will forget in time. She never wore that jewelry. As for the money, well, it was a couple thousand, that's all. I'll make it up from my paycheck," Billy said on the phone. But Anthony had a feeling this was going to end badly, and today's studies were much more interesting. Approaching the end of the course, the teacher Elizabeth asked the students about their future plans for self-realization in the field of accounting. Everyone told about their plans, only Anthony had only hopes. He honestly admitted that he had great doubts about employment and that he was setting himself up for a difficult path in advance. After class, Elizabeth asked Anthony to stay late. She said that her daughter, as a student, was volunteering in the field of disabled people and their adaptation in society. She promised to talk to her daughter about Anthony's situation. She might be able to offer some advice. Anthony thanked her profusely, but in his friend's apartment, he was already in for an unpleasant surprise. Someone had gone through all his things and scattered them all over the room. Obviously, the person was looking for something and didn't find it. Anthony immediately realized that it was Lucy who was angry. He now had no doubt that she suspected him of stealing jewelry and money. Anthony didn't wait for Billy to return from work. He gathered all of his personal belongings with great difficulty, put them in his gin bag, left a final thank you note on the desk, and headed toward the familiar park bench. It was noticeably colder at night. In addition, the park had become crowded with drunks and debauchees. Anthony was worried about his last savings, which he hid not in his pockets, but in a makeshift stitching in the inside of his clothes. And it was a skill that life had taught him. As the time passed midnight, the cold became unbearable. The rain began to drizzle. Anthony didn't want to get sick at such a difficult moment, so he decided to break his promise. At the nearest supermarket, he bought a small bottle of alcohol and drank it. Next, he decided to stay up all night to stay warm. Instead, he decided to repeat by heart the knowledge he had learned in the course. For this, he did not go unnoticed by two policemen. Seeing a drunken cripple in a wheelchair, the policemen did not ask a lot of questions, loaded him into their car, and brought him to an institution. At this establishment, he was questioned in detail about everything. His documents were checked, and he was brought to a small room where there were several other men with disabilities of different ages. Anthony only realized then that he had been taken to a shelter for the disabled. He liked it here. Now he has his own bed with clean linens again. The residents are fed 3 times a day. During the day, they have physical training, do some simple intellectual activities, and most importantly, people with disabilities find understanding company here. The residents were very curious. Anthony noticed that here people don't talk much about their past, but they can finally dream together freely, discuss their plans, and give each other useful advice. His new friends praised Anthony for his eagerness to learn a challenging new profession. Here came the day of the end of the course. All trainees were presented with certificates of completion and wished success in their realization. At parting, Elizabeth told Anthony that her daughter wanted to talk to him. Anthony gave his phone number and began to look forward to the call. Cecilia called the same evening. "Anthony, Good evening. My mother Elizabeth told me about you. I, in turn, have told my friends about you. Some of them are interested in meeting you in person. Write down your address and please come by Tuesday morning at 11 o'clock. Ask for Harvey. He'll be waiting for you there. Anthony thanked Cecilia profusely and now looked forward to Tuesday. It was only half a day away. Harvey turned out to be a pleasant young man about Anthony's age. He gave me a little tour to start with. The most progressive representatives of our youth gather here. Most of them are still students and even school children. But all of us are united by one thing: to believe in our dreams and to go to them. And when there are like-minded people around, it is easier to achieve your goals, isn't it? Harvey talked about everything with enthusiasm. Indeed, in various offices, young people were working at large tables, some of them discussing their projects. In the cozy kitchen, there was also a group of young people sitting around, discussing ideas over a cup of coffee. Anthony's eyes lit up. As a child, he had dreamed of working in such a modern building and surrounded by such energetic people. Anthony, we're told you took a course in accounting. I'd like to offer you the position of Assistant Chief Accountant. In this position, you will be able to learn the practical aspects without too much responsibility. Our company is interested in the growth and development of its employees. If you are interested, we will be happy to involve you in other projects over time. Anthony agreed without a second thought, and indeed, the team turned out to be very progressive. There wasn't a single person on the team who would plot against Anthony like Gob had done in his previous job. True, Anthony still had to make incredible efforts, but he saw their result. He was gradually moving towards success. Anthony has been working at his new job for 3 months now and is very happy with his new life. His dream of prosthetic legs is getting closer and closer. He continued to live in a shelter for the disabled. One day, Harvey called Anthony to his place and started an interesting conversation. Anthony, I see how hard you're working. I'd also know you have an important goal. If you've noticed, everyone on this team is committed to thinking outside the box. I'd encourage you to take a closer look at that approach. You can accelerate your dreams. And besides, your life doesn't end with prosthetics. It starts there. You need to want more, then you'll reach your current goals much faster. Anthony didn't really understand what Harvey was talking about, but Anthony liked his words and his vision of life very much. Have you never thought about starting your own business? Harvey asked. This is my wildest dream, only it's behind another dream. I can only begin to take decisive action by being able to walk on my own. You're still thinking in patterns. I would suggest that you ask the people who live with you in the shelter what they would like most. I already know they want a full life. Only for some of them it will remain a dream, said Anthony. In this case, you should strive to bring their lives as close to their dreams as possible. I think you'll find a better solution, said Harvey. For several days afterward, Anthony thought about these phrases. After much thought, he came to the conclusion that the suggestion to make life easier for other disabled people had a valuable basis. Anthony began researching various stories on the internet. He found many examples of people who unexpectedly lost the opportunity to live a full life and eventually found an opportunity to grow from it. Anthony decided to seriously engage in the development of various adaptations and household devices for the disabled. Studying different materials, he noticed that such things are produced only in some countries. Because of that, their cost in other countries is very high. When Anthony studied this issue even more deeply, it became clear that the production of such products does not require anything fantastic. Everything is made of ordinary materials. Now he hurried with his idea to Harvey. Harvey found the idea brilliant and asked the other guys on the team to help Anthony develop his own business plan. Who's going to give me money for my business? I have no experience. I have no assets to guarantee any compensation. Anthony continued to be in doubt. Why do you see what you don't have? You have a team of like-minded people. You are surrounded by the best specialists in various fields. Don't worry about money. There are many options for realizing such projects. Just mentally accept that some very rich people are interested in supporting as many ideas like you as possible. Just mentally accept it, Harvey said and smiled. Anthony was now actively engaged in working out a plan for his case. His eyes were burning. He did not feel tired, and it seemed that gradually even his thinking had changed in another direction. There was less and less doubt in his abilities. After a couple of months of hard work, there were several people who were interested in Anthony's project. With each of them, Anthony had to go through long interviews. Each time, he became more confident. Eventually, one of these people agreed to become his partner in the realization of the new business. After a few months, Anthony headed to the clinic for an extended stay. During his absence, his friends and associates supported his business. From the clinic, Anthony returned a different person, leaving his wheelchair there. He walked into his office as if on his own two legs. It was true that the prosthesis still caused some inconvenience, but all this was surmountable. Anthony had a lot of important things ahead of him. He promised his fellow shelter members to make a device for each of them. Harvey's teammates were actively telling Anthony's story everywhere and anywhere. So, by then, Anthony had amassed an impressive list of customers. He and his team could hardly keep up with the production of new fixtures. Already in the next phase, entire organizations and clinics were becoming his customers. Anthony had to expand his team as a matter of urgency, which was not difficult for him. One day, Anthony was sitting in a restaurant waiting for a man. He paid no attention to the people around him, occasionally talking on the phone and leafing through his reports. He didn't even notice that someone approached him and was about to call out to him, "Anthony, is that you?" Anthony raised his head and saw painfully familiar eyes in front of him. Forgotten with tremendous effort on his part, it was Selena. Anthony stood up from his seat, unable to find a phrase. "Do you mind if I sit down with you?" Selena smiled her usual radiant smile. "I see you've achieved your goal. I'm very happy for you." Anthony didn't want to talk about the past, but he was more than happy to talk about the future. He'd also like to talk about his current affairs. Of course, he was doing important work for others and developing a special business. Selena listened to him and never ceased to be amazed. But things didn't work out with Gob and me. He quickly joined the bottle, devoting all his time to his friends. My attempts to make things work didn't work out with him. That's why I had to leave him with his choice. But I have my son growing up. Selena showed her phone pictures of a 5-6-year-old boy. A few minutes later, a girl walked into the cafe and made her way to Anthony's table. He greeted her and introduced her. "Cecilia, I'd like you to meet Selena. We used to work at the same place. We just met by chance. Selena, this is my wife Cecilia." True, it was not Elizabeth's daughter. He met this Cecilia while he was running around implementing his plans. But that's a separate story. While Anthony was happy, in love and satisfied with his own person. These events took place over the course of 10 years. I had a truly accomplished man sitting in front of me. And I still can't forget the 20-year-old young man who, with pain in his eyes, asked passers-by about the secrets of success. That's just one story I witnessed in journalism. Anthony and I still talk occasionally. He and Cecilia have a beautiful family now. He continues to make strides in helping millions of disabled people make life easier. Ariana never knew or guessed how her life would turn out. She grew up in an ordinary family with a mother and father, both ordinary people. She went to kindergarten, then to school, and after that she entered the technical college. "Ariana, what do you study there all the time?" asked her friend, with whom they lived together in the dormitory. "You should study a little too," she reproached her. "Well, you know, we are not given our youth to spend it sitting behind the textbooks," replied the neighbor cheerfully. "Well, if you think so," Ariana agreed with her and continued to study. Not to say she knew everything well. Her grades were average, but if she didn't read and study, she wouldn't have. Once Ariana agreed to go for a walk with her neighbor. It was spring, it was sunny outside, everything was beginning to bloom, and the girls were in the same mood. "Oh, we have a new girl in the company," said one of the guys. "Yes, this is Ariana, my roommate," introduced her girlfriend. "And I'm Max," approached her the one who first noticed her. Ariana was very shy. She had never socialized before, much less dated boys. The guy sat down next to her. It just made her dizzy. That afternoon, and then the evening, they sat for a long time just in the park. Max tried to woo. The girl noticed it. She was pleased. "Well, we'll probably go home," got up from her seat the one who'd brought her here today. "I'll walk Ariana home myself," Max said then. "It's on the way. We're in the same room," said her friend. "So what? There are so many suitors sitting there. Take anyone and go," he showed her. "Okay," she seemed offended. "Why did you do that?" Ariana asked him as they walked away from everyone. "I really liked you. I wanted to hang out with you." He didn't bullshit her. Good. She blushed a little because she liked the guy too. Ariana had never imagined what it could be like to see a man like that and disappear. Maybe because it was the first time, or maybe for some other reason. They were walking through the evening streets, and Max didn't take the shortcut. He took a detour. "We have to be there in time for closing," she warned him. "I know," he smiled. They walked on in silence, but not for long. "Tell me something about yourself," the boy asked her. What was it? Ariana immediately imagined that she had to start with her childhood, her parents, her school. What you're into, how you live, what you dream about. Max put her on the right track. "Oh, you mean that?" She was laughing. "Yeah, what are you talking about?" Looked at her. "Nothing," she smiled again, imagining how she would have started now from time immemorial. "Well, I'm ready to listen," the boy hurried. "I have nothing to say. I graduated high school, came here, and that's it. I'm studying." She was laughing now. "Well, what do you like? Drawing, singing, dancing?" He didn't know why he asked, but for some reason he wanted to know. "I don't know. No main hobby. A little bit of everything," she shrugged. Ariana used to draw, and she even liked it. But when she got in and started studying, she gave it up. Her easel that her parents had given her was still standing or lying around. "I see. So we'll look for something we both like," he told her. They reached the dormitory, said goodbye, and agreed to meet the next day. Ariana went up to her room. The roommate was already here. She was lying on the bed, facing the wall. "Are you offended?" the girl asked her, but she didn't even turn around. Ariana shrugged, undressed, turned off the light, and lay down too. Tonight, she dreamed about Max. For some reason, the girl thought that God had sent him to her, that he was her destiny. The next day, she didn't want to think about her studies. She dreamed about her new acquaintance. She liked him so much. Her neighbor never spoke to her. Ariana didn't understand what she had done to make her so angry for so long. When the girl was leaving the technical school, she saw that Max was already waiting for her. "I didn't think you would come here," she approached him. "I decided not to wait for anything and immediately invite you." He hugged her with one arm, and the young people walked down the sidewalk. "And where are we going?" decided to ask the girl. "You'll find out soon," he spoke enigmatically. Good, the girl liked surprises. She realized that she needed to prepare for her exams, and in general, for the lessons that were assigned. But next to him, Ariana didn't think about anything else. She didn't need anything, just to be together with this young man. They came to a small restaurant, sat down at a table. Max ordered something unpretentious because he realized that the girl, after studying, hungry. First the guy and the girl had a little snack, and then went to talk. What only they didn't talk about today. "I feel like I've known you all my life," Max said to Ariana. "I have the same feeling, and it was only the second day of their acquaintance." Today the guy walked her to her dormitory, and they never parted again. He came to pick her up every day, or they met in the park. How grateful the girl was to her roommate for taking her out that night. When the vacation started, Ariana took Max to meet her parents. "Wow, you sent her off to get her diploma, but you brought a fiancé," her father told her when they met and laughed. "Yes, meet Max. This is Max, and we love each other very much," she said and looked at the young man. At first, the parents as well as the young men were a little shy. Mom asked if they were going to sleep together or separately. Ariana blushed and said separately, but Max said they were adults. They could sleep next to each other. The woman then appreciated that the guy could decide things. "Would you like me to show you how I cook dolma?" Max asked once. "Of course, I have never even heard of such a dish," the father was surprised. So Max took all the ingredients and started cooking. He tried so hard that it was funny for Ariana to watch him. "So it's practically our stuffed cabbage, only smaller and not in cabbage," her mom wondered then. "You could say that," the young man nodded his head. The boy showed them many other things that no one knew. The father learned new things for himself and praised his daughter for choosing a wonderful guy. They spent almost half of the vacation visiting her, and then they had to go back because school was starting. "Why don't you move in with me?" Max asked her when she was getting ready to move back into the dorm in early September. "Wouldn't I embarrass you?" She looked at him and realized that he was definitely her other half. "What are you talking about?" He took her by the waist and pulled her to him. Ariana decided she had nothing to think about. They had been together all summer, so now she just stayed, and that was it. Now the girl went straight from the apartment to the technical school. It was convenient because it only took a few minutes to walk. Previously, from the dormitory, even if you go yards, it took 15 minutes, and now it was only 5. She was so happy to have such a reliable and beloved person with her, and she was afraid of only one thing, to lose him. Every evening Max arranged some surprise for the girl. She loved it so much that she was already waiting for it. And today, they had dinner, then went to the room, watched a little TV. Max went to the light switch. The light in the room went out. That was it. She asked him a question. "And what else?" Did not understand the guy. "What about the surprise? I'm so used to them already." Though it was dark, Ariana looked in his direction. "Will you marry me?" the guy asked her. "Max, it's not done that way at all," she laughed. "What does it matter if there is love between two people, the way it is done?" He started kissing her. "Do you have a ring?" She wasn't begging, she was just asking. Of course, he rummaged his hand under her pillow and pulled something out. It was dark in the room, so he couldn't see. "Why is it there?" Ariana wondered again. "Wanted you to find it in the morning. Still the same sans selenium," he told her. "I agree." She hugged him, and it seemed to Max that she was crying. It was settled then. He hugged her tighter, and so they fell asleep. The next day, Ariana called her parents. The guy didn't have them. Told them she was getting married, what her father offered her, but Ariana refused it all. She had no money of her own, and it was inconvenient to spend other people's money. Then they agreed that the daughter would tell them the date when the event would take place, and then they would come. At the registry office, they were assigned a day. The woman who accepted the application in general offered to sign in a week, but the young refused because the girl's relatives would not have time to come. "Aren't you going to call your friends?" Ariana asked Max. "Do you want to?" He was ready to do anything for her. No, she was just asking. She felt bad that he was talking to them and wouldn't invite them to the wedding. That was it, so it would be as they decided. He kissed her again, and again, and again. It was decided not to buy a dress. Max had a suit, so the costs were minimal. "Congratulations," said the mother and father when the young put their signatures. "Thank you," they hugged. "So, that's it. You took our daughter from us?" The father shook Max's hand. "Yes, you are not the only ones to be happy. He looked at his wife and was happy. He could not even imagine before that he could see this diamond among the crowd, but now she was next to him, and he was happy immensely. After the registry office, it was decided to go to a restaurant and a little to celebrate the event. After all, that was the birth of a new family. Parents were also not against it. If they were given the will, they would have thrown a grand feast. The relatives spent the night at the young people's house because there was nowhere else to go. It's all right, they said, as long as we're cramped. And in the morning, Ariana's parents went home. From that moment, she began her real adult life. In May, Max and Ariana were to graduate. They were so happy about it, because then they wanted to get a job, have a baby, and do many other things. But all this was not destined to come true. Max received a summons. "I thought you had already." The girl looked at him confused. She did not want to part with the man who had become everything for her, love, and life. No, he shook his head. He himself was very offended by it, because he also did not want to part. "Well, that's all right. I'll wait for you, and I think you believe I will." Ariana wanted to cry, but she held on. With tears, she would only show the guy how hurt and sad she was, and she didn't want him thinking about that right now. "It's going to be okay, Max," as if he was supporting not only her, but himself as well. He was holding on as best he could too. He didn't want to hurt her. Now he had to go through medical exams and other procedures, and then he would leave. Ariana was so afraid of this day, but she couldn't help it. It was fast approaching. And now, they were on the platform. She was crying. He was crying too, though he didn't want to show it. "I love you," his wife whispered into his chest. "And I you." He leaned over and did the same into her hair. Their hands parted. He climbed into the wagon and waved she to him. This time was the last time Ariana saw her lover. He left and she went home. She didn't feel like doing anything at all for a week. And then she got her first letter. Max wrote that they were in boot camp. Everything was fine. Ariana answered him, she wrote, and she didn't have enough lines to tell him everything, how much love she had for him. Several months passed. All this time the young people corresponded, but for a while the letters stopped. Before that, they wrote almost every day, and now it had been almost 2 weeks. There was nothing. And then finally, there it was, the long-awaited letter, in which Max wrote that he was being sent to a hot spot, and most likely there would be no letters yet. Ariana cried and pressed the paper against her. Well, how could it be? She couldn't understand. The girl just cried all day after that. But 3 weeks later, she had to receive worse news. The military enlistment office came to her. Her heart sank into her heels. She looked at the man in uniform and realized he wasn't bringing her good news. "Your husband died a brave death." She heard the words as if through absorbent cotton. She didn't question anything, didn't say anything, just settled back against the wall. Then there was the lineup, the funeral, the honor guard. But Ariana barely remembers any of that either. Her parents were there to support. Unfortunately, there was nothing they could do for their daughter. "Thank you for everything. You can go home," sat the grief-stricken girl and said to her father and mother. She didn't want to see or hear from anyone right now. And no amount of condolences or anything else would save her, much less bring back her loved one. "Are you sure you can handle it?" Her father came up to her. He loved his daughter and wished her well. They had already offered her to move in with them, but she had flatly refused. "Yeah," she shook her head. "And why ask that? You can handle it. You can't handle it. It just so happens. He's gone and she needs to accept it." The man and woman saw fit to leave their daughter alone. They realized how hard it was for her right now, so they quietly packed up and left. How could it be? Ariana looked at Max's picture. "Why did you leave me? You promised to come back. You said that everything would be fine, and you didn't do it." She cried harder and harder. They had been together, just nothing, and now he was gone altogether. he had left her alone. Ariana decided to stay in this apartment, and even though everything reminded her of her lover, it made her feel better. She realized that she had to go out to work, because she didn't want to go to her parents, much less ask them for help. And then, all the time walking and talking to herself was disgusting. She had to do something. Hello. She began to go to different stores and asked if anyone needed a salesman. But no one would take her on, mostly because of her lack of experience and seniority. What am I supposed to do? She didn't understand. Ariana sat on the couch at home, crying and turning to herself again. She had dinner and looked at the newspaper. In the advertisements, she saw that a large firm needed a cleaner. Anything was suitable now. Why, I don't need much. This will do for now, she decided to herself. In the morning, she called the phone number that was listed at the end of the ad. Yes, come in, they told her on the phone. It turns out you don't need any experience to go to work as a technician, she said to herself in the mirror. Ariana put on her usual dress and left the house. The walk wasn't very close, so she timed it just in case. Good afternoon. I called today about the cleaning lady. She walked into the reception area. Yes, come in, they're waiting for you, the receptionist pointed to the door. Ariana walked through. A middle-aged man was sitting at the desk. He saw the girl and smiled. After that, he told her the front of the job and sent her to HR to make it official. Thank you, I won't let you down. Ariana walked away from him, firmly convinced that she could handle all the difficulties, no matter how hard they might be. There was a silver lining. The hard work would take her mind off Max. Can I congratulate you? The secretary asked her. Yes, Ariana smiled modestly. She had been offered a salary that she would have gotten less as a salesperson. Of course, the work was physical, but Ariana did not calm herself down. She would try, she should succeed. The girl gave her documents, and the next day she had to start work. And today, she went home to think it over. There was something new and unknown ahead. Billy, where are you? Shouted to the boy's father. He had been waiting for him for several minutes, the boy said now, but he was stuck for a long time. Yes, here I am, now, ran from his room, young man. How long can I wait for you? The man had been ready for a long time. Fishing rods, boots, bait, and everything else. Couldn't find a net. He showed him the fishing tackle. I see. Let's go, smiled Dad. He was pleased that the guy is not just for interest with him and understands something. He and his son were going to go fishing together for a long time. And so, today the man had a day off, or rather to say, a little free time. They went behind the house. There was no need to go anywhere, because the pond was right behind their vegetable garden. It was very convenient, because a pond was not a luxury, it was just what they needed for recreation. When Billy's father was young, he dreamed of having his own house with a fish pond. And when he had finished his schooling, he started his own business. After that, when the business began to bring a good income, he bought a house with a plot of land from some grandmother and began to improve it. First, he started on the house, which was a blue dream. During the construction, he went to the store with building materials, and there he met a pretty girl who was young and free. Shall we get acquainted? Asked. Then the man asked her. He had long paid attention to her, and now he dared. Why not? She immediately began to make eyes at him, because the man was prominent, and it was immediately clear that he had money. Then I invite you to the restaurant tonight, he simply said to the girl, and that's how Billy's parents met. First they had dinner, and then together with his girlfriend, and later with his wife. The man finished the house and started to work on the plot. At first, some buildings appeared. There was a bathhouse, sauna, even an indoor swimming pool, as well as various sheds, chicken coops, aviaries, and more. And so, when everything was already ready, the owner of the house decided to do the pond. Good, the land was still there. It took a long time, but he managed to do it. He made a large pond where he launched fish. And when his wife got pregnant, the husband was happy that with his son will go on a real fishing trip whenever it suits him. And today was the day. "Did you bring everything with you?" Billy asked his father. The boy worried about it all the time. Of course, he grinned. He liked swimming with his son. They didn't spend much time together, so at least they could talk, see how things were going. "Who will row?" asked the man, because he wanted his son not to feel superfluous. "Come on, I'll do it first, and when I get tired, you'll take over," the boy rejoiced. Agreed. They got into the boat and swam to the middle of the pond, which was not so small. Billy came into the family, and as soon as he began to understand, knew that nothing forbidden in this life would be for him. As a child, he had a lot of toys. Yes, such that some children did not even know about. He went to an ordinary kindergarten, because there was no other, but everyone envied him there. "Can I have a party tonight?" he asked his parents. At that moment, he was only 10 years old. The first time he was allowed to do it, then Billy began to repeat it very often. And when he turned 13, he and his friends began to gather in the sauna. Later, girls joined them. The father had nothing to spare for his only son. He was ready to buy and let him do whatever he asked. And Billy himself knew that he had everything he wanted, so he took advantage of his father's kindness. "So, son, where are you going to go after high school?" his father asked him when he was in the 11th grade. "Is it obligatory?" The boy did not understand why you cannot buy a diploma. "Look, I can do anything for you, but a bought diploma is the last thing." The man did not approve of the idea. "Okay," Billy stretched out. He didn't want to do it so badly, but he had to do what Dad said. "Okay, I can make concessions for you. You get in, and I'll take you to work for me." He looked at him. "But how will I study?" He didn't understand. "There are correspondence courses." The father hugged his son. "Thank you at least for that." The boy was happy. "But full-time you'll still study a little." Dad wanted the boy to feel what it was like. That was the end of their conversation. They had to finish school. By his senior year, Billy had gotten so cocky that he didn't listen to anyone or pay attention to anyone. He obeyed and did everything his father said, and no one else, only he was an authority. "Will you come to my sauna tonight?" He could approach any girl in class or on the street. She could be someone he didn't know at all. No, they'd turn him away. How about this? He'd show them a few bills. "You won't tell anyone, will you?" They whispered and looked around. "What are you, a grave?" He covered his mouth with his hand, though he didn't need to, because all those girls were one-night stands. After that, he just forgot them. By the time the guy started working for his father, he had no principles left at all. He did what he wanted. "Hello," he entered the office. "Good morning," looked at him those who sat there. But he didn't have time to say anything before his father's assistant walked into the office and told him to come into his office. "Billy, it's time to get serious." He looked sternly at his son. "Okay, what do you need to do?" In front of his father, his knees were shaking a little. "Nothing, for now," corrected the chief. "Then why all this talk?" Didn't understand Billy. To speak respectfully to the employees, not to be rude to anyone, not to insult. The father wagged his finger at him, the boss. "I understand everything. I'll behave like a silk," he promised. "I believe you," stood up, and shook hands with his son's subordinate father. The one left the office and went to where he had just come from. "Hello again." He said hello to his colleagues. They looked at him like an idiot and continued working. "We'll see who's in charge," the young man said in a low voice, and took his seat at the table. He only had a rough idea of what people did here, so for now he just sat and stared at the instructions. In a short time, the young man had made friends with some of the people who worked here. Now they could linger in the evenings, talking, and later, not only that. "Son, of course, I understand that at work it's important to have a friend, but I think you are abusing," his father once told him. Come on, these people are friends with me honestly, not for something, he said to him. Okay, but you drink in the workplace, the boss said directly what he meant. What do you think? A little relaxed. What, you can't? Sniggered the son. A little you can, but last time, remember what you left behind? I didn't want to push, but that's how it worked, father. Well, we'll be more careful from now on, promised the boy, and that was the end of the conversation. But not 2 months after that, he gathered his friends again after work. Can we go somewhere? One of them asked. Why would we do that when we can have fun here, especially since we have everything for that? He took out a bottle of expensive alcohol from the table. Okay, you got it here, so here, said the colleagues. After that, unrestrained fun began. Young people drank, shouted. The music played loudly, but it did not bother anyone. Is it true that your father lets you do everything? Asked one of those who were here. Are you jealous? Billy answered the question with a sneer. No, I was just asking. He took offense, stood up, took his jacket, and went to the door. I guess I'll go too. The other one got up too. You're just going to leave me here alone? Billy didn't understand. Yes, it's time to go home, was the reply of the one who had already gone out of the door. Well, screw you, though Billy had promised his father, but now he couldn't help sending his comrades. He was left alone in the study, poured himself another bottle, drank, didn't know what to do next, decided to go somewhere to relax. Only he opened the door of the office as he ran into a girl. She was with a mop and a bucket. What are you doing here? He asked her in a drunken voice and staggered back. I thought no one was here. I came to clean the office. She heard what was going on, so she stayed a little longer. She thought, looking at Billy from head to toe. I'll be off then, since you're still here. She turned around. Have a drink with me. He offered her a drink. No, she wanted to leave, but he held her hand tightly. What do you mean no? No one refuses me in this life. He furrowed his brow. Then I'll be the first. She wrenched her hand away and walked down the hall. Billy caught up with her in 2 strides, gagged her, and shoved her into the back room. What's that for? The girl resisted. I just want to. He unbuttoned his pants. He couldn't do it, he panted. And you don't care about other people's opinion. She stood in the corner, unable to move. Shut up. He finally got what he couldn't do for so long. The girl cried out. Billy fumbled for her mouth and clamped it shut, and immediately got the hardest bite. Oh, he hit her. She passed out. The young man did everything already in complete silence. He wheezed, breathed deeply, finally collapsed. After that, he got up, shook himself off, got out, and walked towards the exit. Are you staying out late again tonight? The guard on the first floor asked him. You don't have to worry about that, still pissed off at Billy. He hailed a cab, got in, and calmly drove home. He didn't even once think about what might become of the poor thing he'd left in the back room. Son, what's the matter with you? His mother ran up to him as he entered the house. Leave me alone, walked to Billy's bathroom to wash the wound on his arm. After that, he undressed and lay down on the bed to get a good night's sleep, because tomorrow he had to go to work again. In the morning, Billy woke up. He was in a great mood. He didn't remember what he had done yesterday. He was coldly going to work. When he got there, his father called him into his office again. I know you're going to tell me about sitting around at work again. His son sat down across from him. Don't you realize that this is serious? The man looked at him. I do, but sometimes you have to relax. He shook his head. Then why are you doing this? I am everything to you, the father lamented. I promise not to do it again. The young man stood up and went to his office. He walked down the hallway, looking for the girl he had met here yesterday, but she was nowhere to be found. Billy went into his office, looked at his colleagues, with whom he had a fight yesterday, smiled, went to his seat. He didn't talk to anyone else that day. Colleagues also, as well as Billy, were reprimanded by the boss for going along with him and staying here with him, so they didn't stay at work any longer. "Hi, can you tell me where reception is?" The young man had already been working at this firm for a year, and now he was stopped by a very pretty girl. Sure enough, Billy smiled at her and led her down the hall. They entered the reception area, and she walked to the supervisor's office, while the guy stuck to the receptionist. "Who's this?" He attacked the girl with questions. "What, did you like it?" She smiled. "Tell me to settle in or just some kind of check." He didn't know what else to assume. Settling in, the girl looked up from her paperwork. "Good." He turned to the window and smiled at Billy. The girl walked out. She headed for the exit. "Wait," jumped the young man from his seat. "Yes?" She turned around. "So, did they get you?" He followed her down the corridor. "No, there are no suitable vacancies," she replied sadly. "Don't feel bad. Would you like me to buy you a drink?" Billy glanced at his father's door, thinking it wouldn't hurt if he left for a couple of hours. "I'm probably distracting you from your work, aren't I?" she suggested. "Come on, if that were the case, I wouldn't be suggesting such a thing," he laughed. "I won't say no to coffee then." The guy and the girl were already at the exit. "That's fine." They went to a cafe that was very close by. "My name is Billy," he introduced himself gallantly. "I'm Katie." She laughed at the way he spoke. "Nice to meet you." He opened the door for her to come in. Likewise, now Katie was starting to feel embarrassed in front of him for some reason. They sat at a table and drank coffee, talking about different topics. The girl told him that she had recently graduated from school. She wanted to go to work and at the same time to study further. Billy envied such eagerness, but he didn't say anything about it. "Why don't we have dinner tonight?" He looked at his watch. "With pleasure," the girl smiled openly. "That's great," rejoiced the young man. He really liked her. Previously, there were girls so for once, and this one he wanted to protect, to take care of. After the young men had finished their coffee, they went their separate ways, Billy back to work and Kathy somewhere else. When he returned to the office, no one even noticed his absence. Billy sat down at his desk and could think of nothing else but his new acquaintance. He went home early today because he wanted to get ready for the meeting. Billy asked his mother to get him a suit. She was surprised. It wasn't often, one might say never, that her son asked her for such a favor. For a date? She prepared everything he'd asked for. "Yes, and I want your advice on what to buy as a present." For the first time since he was little, Billy asked his mother for something. Flowers and a small gift for the first time. "Let it be something simple," the woman said. "Thank you." Billy went up to her, and in that moment, he realized that he had done a lot of things wrong in his life. "My darling, I know we have spoiled you, but you are still our most favorite boy," hugged and cried his mother. "I'm sorry." He looked at her again. "No need. You better bring your girlfriend to meet you," she told him. "I promise, but not today, and she's not my girlfriend yet." He put on his suit and left the house early to go to the store. With Kathy, they had arranged to meet near the entrance to the restaurant, and Billy was anticipating the meeting. He stood in the flower store, wondering if this was the first time this had ever happened to him. He really liked the girl. "Can you advise me what flowers to buy for a first date?" he asked the clerk. "Get some white roses," the sales clerk advised him. "Thanks, I'll do that." He took out the money and paid. After that, Billy went to another store. He decided to buy Kathy some perfume. To date, he saw her, and the girl reminded him of morning dew, freshness. That was exactly the flavor he was going to pick up for her. When the young man told all this to the girl behind the cash register, she immediately handed him a small bottle. Billy inhaled the fragrance and realized that it was the one. "I'll take it," he said without a doubt. The box was packed at the customer's request, and now, ready, Billy went to the meeting place with the one he wanted to see always. When the young man approached the restaurant, no one was there. Thought the girl might be inside. He quickly climbed the stairs, went in. But there was no one there, or rather, there were people, but not the one the guy was waiting for. His hands went down. He lowered his head. He thought that she wouldn't come. "Sorry, I'm late." He heard her voice from behind him. "Katie," Billy turned around, "and I thought I'd never see you again today." It just so happened. She looked at the flowers. "Ah, yes," he realized, and handed the girl the bouquet. Delighted, they still stood at the entrance. But they were quickly approached by a man who led the couple to a table. "What will you drink?" Was looking at the young man's menu. "If possible, a little wine," she asked. "Good, then I'll have some wine too." Billy called the waiter over, made him an order, and then turned to the girl. "What?" she stammered. "I don't know." He spoke honestly to her. "It's the first time in my life this has happened to me." "What exactly?" Katie really didn't understand. "Falling in love or something," Billy blushed at first sight. "Me?" She sat across from him and looked him straight in the eye. "Well, who else?" He looked around for a laugh. "We don't know each other at all." She picked up her napkin. "We'll find out," he promised her. At that moment, Billy remembered that he had bought Kathy a present. Just he was about to reach for it when he saw the waiter carrying their order. He decided to wait until the glasses were filled. "Thank you." Kathy thanked the man who poured their wine and looked at her companion again. "Kathy," he raised his glass, "I want to drink to the most beautiful girl I have ever met." "Thank you." She raised hers as well. "When I met you today, I thought I should give you a gift, but I couldn't think of what kind. And you know, you may not like it, but that's the scent I associate you with." He placed a small box on the table. "Billy," why she blushed, clutching her cheeks. "I don't know, if we're together, you'll always smell like that, and if we're not, you'll keep the gift from me." He couldn't believe himself for saying such a thing. Just like that, all at once. All in one night. It was the first time Katie had ever met a guy like that either. She had dated guys before, but it took a long time to get to the point of gifts and confessions. "It makes me want to take you and never let you go again," Billy confessed to her. "Good," she laughed. After dinner, the young man walked the girl home, where they agreed to meet tomorrow. For now, he held her hand and didn't want to let go. Until tomorrow, she looked at him in a way that Billy would never forget. "Well, where's our child disappearing to at this late hour?" His father welcomed him home. "Daddy, I think I'm in love," the son told him. "Do you really believe that, mother?" The man laughed. "Why not? He was buying flowers and gifts for her today." His wife approached him. "Wow, and I thought he would live his whole life like that." His father came up to him and patted him on the shoulder. "Nothing funny about it," Billy said resentfully and went to his room. From that moment on, the boy forgot about everything. He began to work, got involved in the process, and if before he understood little, now he was ready to conquer the mountains. Now, every day they met Kathy. Hi, every time she met him outside the firm. "Love," he kissed her. It had been a long time since the young man had been at work. "Where shall we go?" Katie was happy. "Anywhere you want." He was willing to do anything for this girl. "I don't want to go to a restaurant or a cafe, but just somewhere on the shore of a lake or a river," she said dreamily. "You know, let's go fishing." Billy glowed with happiness that he could offer such a thing to a girl. "How?" Katie's eyes were filled with both joy and consternation at the same time. "Very simple," the boy smiled. "But we have to go, and you have to work tomorrow. Can't we wait until the weekend?" She was really worried about him. "You won't believe it. You don't need to go anywhere, just to visit me." He had been inviting her to meet his parents for a long time, but the girl was shy, postponing the meeting. "You didn't know how to lure me there," she laughed. "It's true. You'll see for yourself." Billy almost swore to her. "Well, all right." She waved her hand. "I'll do it." After that, the young people didn't drag their feet. They drove to Billy's parents' house. "Mom, this is Kathy." They entered the house. The woman was in the kitchen. The father, as usual, was not home. "Oh, why didn't you warn me? I would have cooked something tasty." The woman was worried. "We're going fishing now," and you'll have time to do something. He looked at the girl. So you meant what you said? Katie looked at the young man as he said it in front of her mother. And you thought? Billy walked to the pantry and got the gift. Katie was in awe of everything. She looked around and marveled at how Billy's father had done things here. Today, they sat quietly in the boat. The fishing was good, so Billy and Kathy only had time to pull the fish out. That's enough, I think, or we'll have to do something about it, the young man told her. Yes, I'll help you and your mom, Katie said. She was having such a good time. After that, they just rode on the boat and talked. Kathy, will you marry me? Said Billy suddenly. So soon? She was surprised. What's the drag? He looked at the water. Really, I love you. You love me. We're good together. She touched his arm. So you agree? He stood up. The boat almost overturned. Careful. Please, she almost fell. I'm the luckiest man on Selenium, he shouted. And I love you. They docked at the shore, kissed. Mom, here's the fish. It smelled good at home. Now, son, the woman took the bucket. I'll help. Katie showed up. Good, smiled the woman. She liked her son's friend. Mom, I proposed to Kathy, entered the joyful son to them. So, we will have a festive dinner tonight. The woman was very happy, but did not show it much, because she knew the character of her son. Today, he could grab onto something he liked, and tomorrow, when he got bored, throw it all away. So, you stay here and get ready, and I'll go to the store, Billy said. Okay, the women smiled. Billy left. He wanted to buy the most beautiful ring. He called his father and told him about everything. He promised he would be there tonight. Katie also called her parents, invited them to visit her future husband. They agreed to come, of course. Well, what? Let's raise our glasses to the happy future of the young, muttered the head of the family. Hurrah, said Billy. He was happy for himself. After that, Katie stayed with Billy. The wedding was to take place in 3 weeks. The preparations were in full swing. The groom's parents spared nothing. The bride was very beautiful, and the groom was glowing with happiness. I have something to tell you, Katie whispered in Billy's ear. Can we do it later? The groom was very nervous for some reason. Yes, but I think you'll be happy to hear it, she told him. All right, what do you got? He watched the guests drive up. You're gonna be a daddy soon. She looked at him and smiled. What? He froze, and then slowly turned to his future wife. Just like that, all at once, the girl waved her hands. My darling, he lifted Katie in his arms. That's it, let go, squealed the girl. After this news, Billy's mood was even better than before. He was glowing with happiness. When they were announced husband and wife, and they went to the restaurant, the first thing the groom did was to announce to all the guests the happy news that he himself had learned only a few hours ago. The wedding was over. The young people stayed to live in the husband's house. Everything was made for life here. Kathy liked everything very much. She did not work anywhere. Like her mother-in-law, she stayed at home. They cooked, waited for their husbands to come home from work, and they tried not to be late. Why don't you and I go out anymore? Katie would ask her husband that night. Look, there's so much to do at the company. I can't keep up, he told her. I understand, but I'm bored at home alone, the wife complained. Well, we'll go out this weekend, Billy promised her, and Kathy believed him. And he kept his promise. On the weekend they went to the movies, and after that they went to a restaurant. Well, how's your soul? Holding Billy's hand. Yes, thank you, my love, but I wish we had more of these outings, his wife told him. They sat some more. Already everything had been drunk and eaten. Now the young people were just talking. Nothing bothering you? Billy asked when Kathy started to wrinkle and grabbed her stomach. No, something prickled. The period was already long, so Billy was worried. How much longer to walk? He asked, because he couldn't do the math himself. 2 months, she said calmly. Okay, at that moment his phone rang. Billy, Daddy's not feeling well. Come home quick. Mom yelled into the phone. What? He turned to Katie. "What's wrong?" She was worried. "Let's go home," he paid, took his wife's hand, and they walked quickly towards the exit. "Tell me what's going on." The girl started to get nervous. "Daddy is not feeling well," he said quickly. They were home in a few minutes, and the ambulance was already here. "Billy." Mom ran out to him. She was crying. "I'll go with him," the son said quickly. He walked towards the ambulance. "Oh," almost sat down Katie. "Daughter, what's wrong with you?" Grabbed her mother-in-law's hand. "I don't know," she squinted in pain. "Billy," his mother shouted to him, and he looked over, saw that his wife wasn't feeling well, ran over. He was tearing up now. "Let's go." He picked her up in his arms and called for the doctors. They saw that help was needed here too, quickly ran up. Now the doctors were in the car, one with a seizure, the other with stomach pain, and with them Billy, who was almost going crazy because he was worried about both of them. At the emergency room, Katie was taken to the delivery room and the man was taken to the intensive care unit. Billy couldn't move away. He was on duty under the doors, worried about his father. Unfortunately, a doctor came out of the room. Unfortunately what? The young man didn't understand him. He had a massive heart attack. We were not able to save him, the doctor mumbled. He did not look into his son's eyes. "That can't be," sat down and covered his face with his hands. "Better go to your wife. She's having a hard time too," the doctor advised him. Billy remembered about Katie and rushed to the neighboring ward. She was lying on the bed. Some apparatuses were attached to her. "Sweetheart, how are you doing?" asked her inconsolable husband. "How is your father doing?" she asked practically with only one lip. "He's dead," he didn't think, and said Billy. Ah, at this point, Kathy felt so bad she couldn't contain herself. "What did you say to her?" At that moment, a nurse came running into the room. "Sorry," the young man's eyes widened as he saw how bad his wife was feeling. He had been forced out of the room where labor had begun. Everyone feared a dire outcome because things were not going as well as they should have. What happened next, Billy didn't know. He didn't have the physical or emotional strength to bear it all. Two people he loved dearly were now in the hospital, and one could no longer be saved. He was sedated and taken to a room to get some rest. "Daddy, wake up." Billy felt himself being pushed. Oh yeah, he couldn't figure out where he was. "Congratulations, you have a daughter. Only now you won't be able to see your wife or child, because both are in intensive care," the nurse shocked him at once. "What about them?" His mind cleared up immediately. He remembered last night. The woman had a cesarean, her blood pressure dropped and then went up a lot, and the baby is very weak, sick, she explained. Okay, Billy came to his senses completely. He decided that since there was no way to get to his wife and daughter now, he needed to take care of the father. He got ready, went home. His mother was in a state of distress. "Where were you? Why didn't you answer the phone? What about Dad and Katie?" She asked a lot of questions at once. She had circles under her eyes. It was obvious she hadn't slept. "Mommy, sit down." He took her by the shoulders and put her in a chair. "Is it bad?" the woman said, and almost collapsed without feeling. The son went to the kitchen, found drops that Mom constantly dripped, diluted with water, and gave it to her. "Dad's gone, massive heart attack. Katie had given birth last night. I think she was nervous. She and her daughter are in intensive care." He repeated what the doctors had told him. Oh my God, she took a sip from her glass. Now the woman looked like she was alive, but somewhere not here. Arrangements had to be made with everyone to make the funeral arrangements, and that was Billy's job. In just one night, the young man had to grow up. He went from carefree Billy to a serious man. He called here, there, ordered, refused, agreed. Finally, everything was done, and in 2 days, the farewell to her father was to take place. By this time, Katie had been moved out of intensive care. She was now in a simple ward, The husband arrived immediately. "Did you see the daughter? What did you name her?" He kissed her and peppered her with questions. "I saw her. She's better now. We have Selena. Will be discharged soon. How are you?" Katie was very thin. Selena, as if he could taste the name. After the funeral, everything the father had passed to his wife and son. Now he had to run the firm. Billy didn't change his father's deputies and assistants, as they knew everything and could help. The man himself was now torn between work and the hospital, where his wife and daughter were still hospitalized. He came to see them. Billy had spared no money on doctors. When almost 3 months had passed, mom and daughter were discharged. During that time they had changed several clinics. But now the girl, although she was weak, she was developing well. "So, how are you doing?" Billy asked her when they were fully settled at home. "Good, but I'm afraid we won't be having any more children." Katie didn't look her husband in the eye. "Maybe it's for the best. I don't want to go through that again," he humped her. After that, the family lived in the same house. Grandmother and mother took care of Selena, who grew up as a weak and sickly girl. Billy worked. Now there was no more drinking and partying in his mind. He had to not only provide for his family, but also raise the firm. When Selena was 4, the family decided it was time to put her in kindergarten. "Can we hire a nanny and Selena will be homeschooled?" Katie's mother-in-law asked. No nanny was against Billy. He remembered how he himself went to a regular kindergarten, decided that he would not bring up his daughter the way he had been brought up. "Fine, whatever you say." Both his wife and mother agreed with him. By the time Selena went to 1st grade, the father decided to run for deputy and then for the head of the city. "Are you sure that you will be able to pull it all off? You're still young," asked his mother. No. He shrugged his shoulders, but he was determined. Billy got into the deputies, and not in the city, but in the district. Now he could do a lot of things. The factory had gone to his mother, but the man hadn't stopped running it. So, family. Billy liked to gather everyone at the big table at home. "What new stories?" "Nothing. We should be the ones asking you what's new," laughed Mom. Selena was more and more silent. She didn't talk to anyone in the family. She was kind of cloistered. "Daughter, what's wrong?" Daddy always paid attention. "Nothing." She was embarrassed. "Do you want to talk?" Her father would ask her, like his father used to ask him. "Yes," she nodded. "Come on." He took her hand and they went into the other room. And there she cried that she was not loved at school by teachers and students because they knew whose daughter she was. They say that she can do anything, even though she doesn't do anything like that. "So, daughter, do not pay attention to anyone, study well, because this knowledge will be very useful for you later. I didn't listen to my father at the time, so I have to catch up everything now," her father advised her. "Good," Selena agreed. When the girl was in her final grades, she met Harry. The guy was a couple years older. He was a student at the local high school. Selena, always shy and taciturn, suddenly began to blossom before her eyes. They had been dating for a year. Selena was finishing 11th grade. The girl thought that everything in life would be fine. "So, daughter, what are you going to do after graduation?" "As well as his once," asked her father. He was already a very influential man, not only in the city, but also in the region. He could help his child get into any educational institution. Billy had always dreamed of having a son, but his wife couldn't give him one. She even offered to take a boy from an orphanage, but Billy did not want it in any way, saying that he needed his son with his genes. That's why the man had plans for his daughter. What difference does it make, boy or girl? Her character can also be tempered, so that she will manage all the affairs no worse than a man, he told his mother. Lately, the woman gave up a lot. More and more time she spent in bed. Granddaughter, daughter-in-law, and son took care of her. "Dad, I didn't want to tell you this now, but I wouldn't want to go anywhere from our town after graduation." Selena sat next to him and said this. "What are you talking about? If you stay here, you won't have any prospects," he wondered. I've fallen in love, didn't raise her daughter's eyes at him. Harry and I have been together for a year now. What kind of love? What do you want? Selena turned away from her father. You have graduation coming up. Come on, you pass all your exams, and then bring your Harry to meet us. He hugged his daughter. She turned to him. Of course, he kissed his most favorite person. Thank you. You'll see he's nice. The girl's mood changed immediately. Okay, we'll see, said the father, smiling, thinking to himself that it's a complete nonsense. Selena happily went about every day now. She had passed everything that was required. Graduation was set. Well, get ready. Soon we'll go to meet my parents, she told her favorite in the evening, when the graduation was only a few days away. Maybe we shouldn't, he asked. What are you? Did not you say that you love me and would do anything for this? She looked into his eyes. Speaking, he put his arms around her, smiled, and looked off into the distance. Harry was born into a poor family, with only his mom as a relative. Yes, there were grandparents, but not anymore. Now Harry and his mom lived in a small apartment. He went to school. After 9th grade, he went to study to help his mother. And then he met Selena. He himself does not understand how this girl from a rich family paid attention to him. And now he has to go and meet her parents. So, sweetheart, are you ready? Her parents have been asking her since this morning. Of course, today was not only an exciting day because of the fact that the next stage in Selena's life was ending, but also because her boyfriend had to meet her family today. All was well. The diploma was in hand. Now everyone was going to the banquet. The girl spent some time with her classmates. She knew Harry was waiting for her. Hello. She saw him on the corner of the school. Hello. He looked at the girl with loving eyes. Are you ready? She asked him. No, but there's nothing to do, sighed the guy. Let's go, and remember, don't be afraid of anything. My father is strict but fair. It was obvious that Selena was happy with him. They arrived at the girl's house. They got out of the car. When they entered the house, no one greeted them. Strange, Selena wondered. What's strange to you? The father looked out. Why don't you greet us? She smiled at him. Don't you know the way? Billy tried to joke. He already saw who came with his daughter. Come in, children, the mother finally came out to them. They went into the room, sat down at the table. Hello. Harry looked at the man and immediately lowered his eyes. And what did you find in him? Couldn't understand his father. Yes, he tried to bring her up as a simple child, not to spoil her, and not to give all the benefits for nothing. But her father never expected her to bring a poor man into the house. Dad, you can't do that. Selena looked at him. She thought her father might have been drinking. That's why he was talking like that now. The girl was very uncomfortable in front of her guest. I can do anything, laughed Billy. Now you could recognize in him the major he was years ago when he didn't count with anyone. All right, calm down. We'll talk in private later. His wife put her hand on his shoulder. Good. It was obvious that the father did not want to talk at all. Harry, what are you doing? Katie asked him. Just a part-time job, here and there. He avoided a direct answer. Anyway, you don't have anything, do you? Billy asked cheekily. I'll earn it. Harry looked at him confidently. Yeah, you wait and be happy, the head of the family chewed. He wasn't interested in being here anymore. He realized everything from the first glance at this kid. So Billy got up from the table, thanked his wife, congratulated his daughter again, and left the room defiantly. The rest of us sat in silence. I should probably go. The guy looked at the girl. I'll see you off. Selena didn't want the scandal to continue. Besides, she saw that the young man was uncomfortable. Not for nothing I didn't want to go. People like your father are best not to mess with. They went out on the porch. He's nice. He's just probably not in the mood. Selena kissed him. Okay, bye, see you later. But on my turf. They said their goodbyes and Harry went home. He was very uncomfortable with what had happened today at his girlfriend's house, but he was a stubborn guy, and he wasn't going to back down. What, did you leave? Came back out to the table. As you can see, Selena was sad again. Daughter, think about it. Why do you need all this? He is a beggar. He has nothing. What can he give you? Said the father, while his voice was getting louder and louder. You'd think you had it all to yourself. If it wasn't for your father, you wouldn't have any of this, Selena parried. How dare you? He got up from his chair. Honey, calm down, Katie interjected. She knew what her husband could be like when he was angry. Okay, I'm sorry, but this situation has pissed me off, he exhaled and sat back down. It's my choice, not yours, Selena continued. You're not going to be with him, his father said as if he was just asking for a drink of water. Who said that? The girl was furious now. I said it, you're underage, so I can decide for you. Billy was now talking as if he was talking to his subordinates. You have no right to make decisions for me. I have my own opinion. Selena was getting angry. I'll take everything away from you, understandably. If only you stay with him, shouted her father. I don't want anything from you, cried Selena, and got up from the table. Where are you going? Her dad yelled back at her. Away from you. She slammed the door to her room. Why would you do that? Katie tried to calm him down. Don't get involved. If he doesn't want to do it the right way, he'll do it the wrong way, thumped Billy on the table. And what are you going to do? Katie wondered. She knew this man was capable of many things. You'll find out later. He threw his napkin on the table and walked toward the exit. Billy, maybe you shouldn't, his wife shouted after her husband, but he didn't answer anything. He was very angry. The man came to the factory. He hadn't been here for a long time. Everything was done for him by the hired director, but when he needed to think about something or to rest, he came here. Hello, everyone greeted him, but he just nodded. Billy had his own office here, so he went straight into it. He called his assistant over, told her to call one number. Okay, it would be done in a few minutes, she promised. Billy waited. He sat in the office. 15 minutes passed, but it seemed like an eternity to him. Finally, the door opened and a uniformed man appeared. Hello, Billy. You wanted to see me? He asked him. Hello, Archie. It was his classmate who worked in the organs. Okay. He took off his cap and sat down across from his friend. I have a problem I need to get rid of. The official didn't look at him. Speak, we'll think it over. Was ready for any well-paid workman. One kid is engaged in distribution, so he got my daughter hooked on it, he told him. You know where, to whom, and when. It looked like they had the scheme worked out. Billy wrote it all down on a piece of paper. Archie read it and burned it in the ashtray. So, the customer was waiting for an answer. Are you doubting me? Everything will be done beautifully, showed the guest to him with a gesture. I need it to be gone for a few years, was Billy's last request. Everything will be, the employee assured him. That's it then, payment upon fulfillment. Billy didn't want to talk to him anymore. The man left his office. He stayed there alone, but he wasn't there long. He went home. The daughter was gone, and the wife was washing dishes and cleaning up. When she saw her husband come home, she rushed right over to him. Don't mess with me today, he asked her. Okay, she only nodded and went back into the kitchen. Harry was at work when his co-workers showed up. While one told him why they were here, the other slipped everything he needed into his purse. What are you talking about? The guy didn't know what was going on. Come on in. They took him under the arms. Harry stood in the middle of the garage. He were also too understandable. First, they inspected the personal belongings, after that the tools, and then the purse. You're so fearless. I thought you were hiding it somewhere, but you're carrying it in the open, the officer grinned. A report was signed and Harry was taken to the police station. Daddy, what's going on? Selena came running home as soon as she found out. How did you know something was going on? Lily was surprised. I don't realize you did this, she started crying. Daughter, I had nothing to do with it. I told you he was no match for you. He approached the girl and wanted to hug her, but she took his hands away. "If you have nothing to do with it, then help," she asked him. Tears were already running in streams. "Why should I help some junkie?" He didn't understand. "You said you had nothing to do with it, didn't you?" Her eyes got big. "And what? Nothing changed," he hummed, and sat back in his chair. "How do you know you're a junkie then?" Selena shouted so much that her mother came running. "That's it, daughter. Go and mind your own business, and forget about him. You'll have plenty more of those." He waved him off. "What's wrong?" asked the mother to Selena as they walked out. When she told her, the woman was also surprised, but somewhere she was in solidarity with her husband. "I can't believe Daddy would do such a thing," Selena cried. "How did you find out?" Katie couldn't understand. "When Harry didn't come to the meeting, I got worried. I called. The phone was unavailable. I went to his house. His mother told me everything." Selena cried again. "Jesus, daughter." The woman hugged her. "Okay, if he is so, I will act against the father," squinted her daughter's eyes, turned around, and left the house. "Where are you going?" Her mother only had time to shout, but the door had already closed and no one heard her. "Why did you do it?" she asked her husband later. Now her daughter might turn her back on us forever. Now her husband will be in prison. After that she will sing differently, he said, grinning. "You don't know her, she's proud," Katie said. "If she needs money, she'll come running," Lily said smugly. Selena, meanwhile, was on her way home to Harry's house. She went to the door, knocked, and was opened by a crying woman. "Hello again," she said hello to her. "Come in, Selena," was the woman inconsolable. They went into the kitchen, drank tea, talked about what to do next. Nothing was decided. "Can I stay with you tonight?" Selena asked. Of course, the woman had planned to go to her father the next day to ask him. All night, neither woman could sleep a wink. They just lay there, silent, each thinking about their own things. In the morning, Harry's mother got up. She was getting ready. "Where are you going?" Selena asked her. "To your father's," she spoke in a confident tone. "It's no use," Selena shook her head. "And who are you and Harry to each other?" suddenly asked the woman. Earlier, the son, in order not to upset his mother, said that they were friends. "You don't know anything?" The girl was surprised. "No," the landlady shook her head. "We are friends." At this point, the woman exhaled. Selena confirmed her son's words. What was the mother to do? She collected all the money to hire a lawyer. Selena helped her. But no one helped the guy. He got 4 years. He could have gotten 8, the lawyer said afterwards. "What can I say?" the woman cried. Harry was taken away, not far away, so Selena could freely go to him on dates. She specifically told her parents that she was enrolling in another city, did it, and herself, so that no one would know, visited her lover. "Didn't you tell your mother that we were dating?" she asked him when she first came to visit. "No, why should I? Your father's known, so she'd worry?" He looked scared. "You know, when she asked me what's going on between us, I told her we were friends," Selena said. "That's good. Let her think so," smiled Harry, who was already getting scared for her. The two of them were very good together. Selena came to see her lover as soon as possible. She loved this man with all her soul, and she didn't care what kind of future she had with him. "Selena, why don't we get married?" Harry asked her one day. "I agree." She didn't even think for a minute. "Then we need to arrange to have it all arranged here," the guy worried. "Okay, I'll try." She was ready for anything, just to be with her lover. They could meet and just be silent for hours, because with some people silence is interesting. About informing her parents about the wedding, the girl didn't even think about it. She would come home for a while so they wouldn't start looking for her or anything. But Harry's mother, she did call. "Oh, Selena, hi. Well, tell me how you're doing." The woman was happy to hear from her. "I'm fine, Aunt Ariana, and Harry and I are getting married," she said, and waited to see what the woman would say in response. "How married? Your friends? I thought you were just helping him out like that. The woman's voice trembled. Why? Are you against it? The girl didn't understand. Not that, but I advise you not to hurry, the woman asked her. Are you also against our communication? The girl was ready to cry. She was getting hysterical. Calm down, my girl. Just please take your time, Harry's mother asked her. Okay, I don't know what you want to do, but we are determined to do it. Selena disconnected. After that, everyone's mind was a complete mess. Ariana was determined to go to Billy's in the morning. She pulled herself together, exhaled, and opened the apartment doors. Hi, I'm here to see Billy, she told the girl at the front desk. He's busy, she said without even lifting her head. It's okay, I'll wait. Ariana sat down on the chair. He won't be free all day, said the secretary. Everyone says so, but he is a human being. He will still have some natural needs to eat, to go to the toilet. The woman was adamant. Okay, now, picked up the phone, the one who sat behind the desk. Well, what is it? Ariana surprised herself. She had never acted like this before. Come in, said the girl. Thank you, got up from the chair and walked into the office woman. At that moment, all her confidence evaporated. She didn't know what to do or how to behave. Hello, she looked at him. He hadn't changed much. Come in, sit down. Billy thought he was just another local to ask about water, heat, gas, or something else. Billy, I've come to see you about my son Harry. Ariana looked at him. I didn't understand, at which point he broke away from his paperwork and looked at her. A friend of your daughter, Selena's, the woman explained. If you're asking for my help, I'm not involved, he said gruffly. Please listen to me, she begged. I have nothing more to say to you. Come out, or I will call security, he said icily. I could have come earlier, but I didn't dare, and now it's serious. She decided to go with the trump card. And what is serious? He thought something had happened to the guy in detention. Our kids want to get married, she blurted out. What? How is that possible? He thought Selena had already calmed down, because she came home often, talking about her studies and her other activities. She goes to see him on dates, and yesterday she called and said that they decided to tie themselves legally right there. Ariana was practically screaming already. The only way I can stop it is to have them banned from dating. He tapped his pen on the table. That won't change much, the woman cried. What do you know? That's it. I don't want to talk anymore. Go away. He brushed her off like a fly. Harry's your son. She got up from her chair. What are you talking about? Billy looked at his visitor like she was crazy. It's true. She shook her head. Look at you. What a dump you found yourself in. He pointed at her from head to toe. Years ago, I worked as a cleaner at your father's firm. You were there late at night, and as you were leaving, you bumped into me. She began to tell him. Billy calmed down a bit then. He started to remember. He looked at her again. You do realize I'm going to check it out, right? He hummed. Why would I lie to you? She didn't understand. Okay, now go. He kicked her out of his office after all. Ariana walked down the street and cried. She would have never admitted it if it wasn't for this whole circumstance. Then, when Billy dragged her into the back room and threw her there, she got up, went to the restroom, cleaned herself up. She went home through the service entrance so no one would see her. At home, she cried all night, called her mom. Hi, can I come over? She asked her. Why do you ask? Of course, come over. Mom was afraid her daughter had something wrong. Ariana called the next day at work, said she was quitting, and went to her parents' house. She stayed with them for a month and was on her way home when she realized she was pregnant. Mom, I think I'm expecting a baby, she said to the woman she was closest to. From whom? Her mother was stunned. Yes, I had a boyfriend, she lied. What do you think you're going to do? The woman wondered then. Nothing, give birth. Ariana was surprised by her question. What, you regret it? Her mother asked question after question. No, I loved Max so much, and I wanted to have children with him, but he died and left me nothing. I know for sure that I will have no one but him, so at least I'll leave a child," said the daughter to her mother, and cried at that. "Do as you know. My father and I will support you in everything," her mother reassured her then. Ariana decided to stay with her parents during her pregnancy. She gave birth in the same city. She came home when Harry was almost 6 months old. Her mom asked to go with her, but no one took her with her. Ariana wanted to bring up her son by herself, but the grandparents were not forbidden to visit. So, poorly, she raised her boy on his feet. When he went to kindergarten, she got a job there as a nanny so that he was always in her sight. When he went to school, his mother did not follow him, so she worked in the kindergarten. All this she remembered at home when she looked at the album where her son was small. And now, how did he happen to meet Selena? Why did that family give them nothing but trouble? In the meantime, Billy had ordered a biological test from the boy and had also taken his own. Now all they had to do was wait for the results, and then everything would fall into place. "Why are you so nervous?" his wife asked him at home. "I can't say yet. He didn't want to tell anyone anything ahead of time." "Okay, I'll wait. But you calm down, you're not taking care of yourself at all," she said. "Kathy, I don't want to talk to anyone yet," he answered her gruffly. His wife just stepped aside. "Okay, I'm not telling you anything." She realized that when her husband was in that condition, there was no need to say anything. And Billy waited. The days dragged on. He couldn't do anything. Sometimes his head started to hurt so badly that it seemed that only an axe could help. Finally, he got a call from the clinic, inviting him and Ariana to get the results. "Ariana, hello." The man spoke to her in a different way. "Good afternoon," she said politely. "Listen, the results are ready. We need to pick them up. We are invited," he said, and his voice was shaking. "Okay, I'll come straight there," the woman said and hung up. Billy was as anxious as a schoolboy before an exam. He was waiting for Harry's mother to arrive, and she walked through the doors. After that, they were given envelopes. The man looked at the woman. She was calm. "Aren't you worried?" he asked her. "Why should I be worried? It's going to say 99 and 9. I'm sure of it." She looked at him with a winning look. "Let's see." Billy was sweating. He opened the envelope. He immediately ran his eyes down the page. It did say 99 and 9, and continued with the 9s. "So, are you going to help your son now?" she asked. "Why didn't you say anything before?" he asked tearfully. "Why did I have to say something to make you think that we need something from you?" She didn't understand. "I'll take care of it." He looked at his watch and pulled his cell phone out of his pocket. "Archie, hi. We need to meet." Then he turned and walked away. Ariana didn't hear any further conversation. She stood and smiled, but she was able to prove to this pompous turkey that there is always a boomerang return in life. "It's certainly not all done quickly, but we're doing the best we can," he said guiltily to Ariana. "Thank you for that, but now we have to do something about the wedding." She reminded him of what started it all. "Yeah, now that it's out in the open, come to our place this weekend. Selena's coming too. We'll talk about it," he suggested. "Okay, I hope the girl is smart. She won't resist. It will make it worse for her," Ariana said, and walked out of the hospital with her head held high. Billy was so happy. He'd always wanted a son, and now he had one. And not some orphanage kid, but his own. He wanted to share the news with someone, but he didn't know who to confide it to. So he came home and went up to his mother, who was still lying in bed. "Hi, sweetheart, are you all right?" he asked her. "Not anymore. I'm so used to this pain that I don't feel it anymore." She reached out her hand to her son, and he sat next to her on the bed. "Can you imagine? I have a son." He began to tell the woman how it all turned out. "Wow, listen, the firm is registered to me. I want to leave it to my grandson. It's my last wish," she said, and she seemed to have run out of strength. I don't mind, Billy smiled. Selena called home before the weekend, saying she was coming over. Before that, she'd gone to Harry's house and was told there would be no date. She asked why, and was told that the guy had filed an appeal, and it had been granted, and now all charges against him were dropped. The girl didn't understand what was going on, but it was to her advantage. Ariana, Selena's definitely coming, so we're looking forward to seeing you this weekend for a visit, Billy called her. If you thought back to how he had interacted with her a few days ago and today, you could see a colossal difference. Okay, I'll be there Saturday night. What about Harry's case? It was more interesting to her than talking to Selena. It's all right. Some formalities will be resolved now and he'll come home too. The man spoke calmly. I'm glad of that, the woman smiled. On Saturday, she got up early, cleaned herself up, and was ready to go, but looked at the clock, which showed only noon, stopped. Ariana went out to the courtyard. There were many women sitting on the benches, some she knew, some she just knew. Ariana, hello. We heard the official helped your son, they said. The woman had heard it before, but the news didn't report it. What's the big deal? He'd help you too if you asked, she said. That Billy's the kind of guy you can't ask for snow in winter, they said. Now Ariana didn't know why she was sticking up for Billy. What did you say to him to make him do it? We've seen Harry and his daughter. They've started picking up gossip again. What else have you seen? Ariana didn't want to be a part of this mess. Maybe that's why he helped her, because he's going to be a son-in-law soon, the neighbors thought. And you didn't think that my son was innocent of anything. Ariana looked at them reproachfully. Oh, so if they arrested him, he must be guilty, they began to snort. Think and assume as much as you like, the woman said. She got up from the bench and walked away. She thought that while she was walking to Billy's house, it would be just about the appointed time. Hello. She came to visit the man she had hated for years. Come in, and Selena hasn't arrived, he said sadly. So maybe she went to Harry's? Ariana worried. I hadn't thought of that. Lily's eyes raced. Call, the woman asked. Now, the father dialed his daughter's number. She didn't answer. He got nervous. Hello, what's wrong? Katie came out on the porch. Honey, meet Ariana. This is Ariana, Harry's mom, her husband told her. Are you being serious now? She didn't understand. Why not? He didn't understand her. Well, hello there, I'm Katie. She held out her hand. After that, everyone went into the house to find out where Selena was missing. Her phone still wasn't answering. Her parents and more than a few were nervous. What happened? She might not have come before, Katie wondered. Everything will be known soon, Lily said quickly, and dialed the number again. Meanwhile, Selena stood at the big gate, waiting for her beloved to come out. Harry said goodbye to the people who had become close to him during all this time. He himself was in shock at what was happening. First, he was imprisoned without trial. Now he was also being released, but he didn't say anything to anyone. That's it, bro. Take care of yourself. They shook hands. The young man went out of the gate. He was met by his beloved, and even though he spent some time here, in places not so remote, the guy knew exactly where he had to go and what to do. Alright, Selena, my love, I'm back. He hugged her. Oh my God, I missed you. She hung on to him. Don't, it's all over now, they hugged. Let's go to my house. I have such news for my parents that now they will not turn away, she told him between kisses. Harry didn't mind, on the contrary. He wanted to tell his fiancé's father that justice still existed. And no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't do anything about it. On the bus, Selena just clung to the guy and didn't let go until they reached their destination. And then they got off, got into a cab, and drove to a familiar house. Okay, it's getting late. I'm going to go. Ariana stood by the door, saying goodbye to Billy and Katie. Okay, we'll call you as soon as we know anything, they promised her. At that moment, They all heard the gate open and someone walked in. Quietly, Billy put his finger to his lips. What? The women didn't understand. It's Selena. He held his finger up. They opened the front door, and Harry and Selena were indeed standing on the doorstep. Mom, what are you doing here? Didn't understand the young man. We're waiting for you. She looked at her son. She wanted to hug him so badly, and tears Ariana could barely hold back. I mean, how did you know, in general, what's going on? Harry asked, and Billy stood looking at the boy. He really saw some resemblance to his father. Come in. Katie was the only one who was in a calm state of mind and could control everything. She didn't know anything yet, but what she was about to find out now, she had no idea. Since guests were expected in this house, the table was set. Everyone made their way to the large room and sat down at it. Did you guys know we were coming today? Selena didn't understand anything either. Well, you come every weekend. Dad found something to say. Well, you don't greet me like this every time, do you? She pointed to the table. You see, we got company tonight. Billy pointed at Ariana. I don't understand. I was coming here to tell you what I think of you. And here's my mother. You probably came here for the same thing, didn't you? The son turned to her. Okay, I'm about to make a statement. Probably a lot of people at this table will be shocked by it. Billy got to his feet. No, I'm going to make a statement first, Selena said, and stood up as well. Okay, go ahead. Wanted to hear what her father had to say. Harry and I are getting married, and no one can stop us from doing it because I'm pregnant. She looked down at everyone. Billy and Ariana looked at each other, the man's eye twitching. It's impossible, he said in a shaky voice. We're not going to ask anyone, are we, love? Salim looked at the young man, seeking support in him. Yes, he nodded. Okay, kids, let me tell me. Billy couldn't take it anymore. He felt like his heart was about to stop. His daughter and son were about to become husband and wife. And the worst part of it all is they're having a baby. Well, talk already. Tired of waiting for Katie and wondering what happened. Here, the man put an envelope on the table. Katie took it in her hands, ran her eyes, which were bigger than usual. What is it, Mom? Selena snatched it out of her hands. Okay, alleged father. She read first the father's name, then Harry's, looked at them, then at Ariana. Probability of paternity, 99 and 9. Daughter, saw Katie start to slump. Harry managed to pick her up in time. What is this all about? He started yelling at his mother. You happen to be in love with your own sister. I do not understand how, where. The boy fidgeted, then froze. What? Ariana took his hand. So that's why they let me go, he guessed and grinned. What's going on? Selene came to her senses after fainting. You passed out. Her mother, who was sitting above her, told her. I don't mean that right now. The girl sat on the floor and looked at everyone at the table. It turns out Harry is your brother, Billy muttered. That can't be, roared Selena. I'm sorry, daughter. The man lowered his head. They're not related, Katie said quietly. What? All eyes were on her now. I'm sorry, but since it's such a serious matter now, I have to confess, the woman wasn't looking at anyone in the room. Speak. Billy was so pissed off that it couldn't be said. Before I met you, I was dating a guy. He courted, showered me with gifts, compliments, like that. He had no one home. I came over, and we had it all. And then he told me he only wanted me for that. I was bitter and hurt, but my pride didn't allow me to do anything. Katie began to tell me she had gone to the window, and now she was standing with her back to everyone. So, what, you've decided to take advantage of me? Billy guessed. I'm sorry, but just when I was about to kill myself, you got in my way, and everything started to develop so quickly. I thought, why miss such a chance? So I agreed to everything, to intimacy, and to the wedding. She turned and looked at her husband. You know, if I had listened to this story under different circumstances, you wouldn't be standing here right now. But now, he looked at the children. If there had been other circumstances, you would never have known about it, his wife told him. Understandably, he wanted to break something. The way life had turned out. The son he'd always wanted so badly was brought up in poverty, with some woman, and he was bringing up a daughter who wasn't his own. Yes, parents, you've made a mess of things, Celine said. At that moment, they heard some kind of squeezed scream. Mom, Billy jumped up. He ran to her room. Everyone rushed after him. What happened? Katie went over to her mother-in-law's bed. But there was no one to answer. The woman was dead. Emergency, ambulance, the man shouted. For a while, everything that was happening in the house was forgotten because everyone was doing other things. But when the funeral was over, the family gathered again, including Ariana and Harry. So at first I was going to buy you a separate house, but I've changed my mind, Billy began to say. And what did you change your mind? Selena wondered. It will be some time after the funeral, and we'll have a wedding. And then, like Kathy and me, you'll come to live with us in this house, he told the young people. I don't need your handouts. I'll earn my own money, Harry said proudly. Of course you will. I even know where. He put the sheet in front of him that was transferring the firm to him. What's this? The boy didn't understand. You could say the place where you were conceived. Billy turned to Ariana. I don't understand, and I don't know anything about these things, said the young man. It's all right. I was once a young man like you. There's a lot of helpers, and you don't need me. He came over and gave the boy his hand. I'll shake it for you, but don't think I'll take it like a father, Harry told him proudly. All of me took his hand and hugged Billy. With that, Ariana quietly got up from the table and was about to leave. Where are you going, lady? Billy turned to her. Home. What am I supposed to do here? She didn't understand. Your home is here now. The father of her child smiled at her. Why are you deciding for me? She didn't understand. Because you, like us, will soon have a grandson or granddaughter, and the young ones will need the help of grandmothers, the man explained to her. Okay, I'll just go and get everything I need. She left the house and went to her place. She took her time, spending a few more weeks at home until Harry came to pick her up. Son, can't you do something without me? She asked him. Mom, if you don't go there, I won't stay there either, he hugged her. Okay, she grabbed her things, which weren't much, and they left the apartment. On the bench outside the entrance, the local gossipers were gathered again. Ariana, is it true that your Harry is now the owner of the firm? They whispered. How would you know that? The woman wondered how quickly rumors spread in this town. The whole town is talking about it. It turned out that he is the son of that official Billy. And when only you had time, they shook their heads. That's none of your business. The woman got into the car. They drove to a familiar house. The months passed quickly. Selena's belly was growing by the hour. Everything was ready for the wedding. Of course, it was necessary to wait a little longer, but no one wanted the child to be born out of wedlock. So 6 months after the funeral, it was decided to have a wedding. Look at me. I'm like a broad on a samovar, Selena said as she stood in her wedding dress in front of the mirror. Do you want to just sign now, and then we'll have a real wedding? The father asked his daughter. Harry, are you okay? She turned to the groom. I'm in favor. I don't need this banquet at all, he said. He was getting tired of it all. Then I'm in favor of the proposal, Selena said. And already on Saturday, near the registry office, there were only 2 cars. Harry and Selena signed. Only parents were present. After that, they went home to celebrate, because Selena was already on such a term that everything could start suddenly. Mom, her daughter came to her at night. What's wrong? The woman didn't understand in her sleep. I think it started. Katie looked. There was indeed a wet trail behind her. Hurry, Billy. Call an ambulance. The woman shouted. She took Selena to get dressed. Harry was preparing the bag, which was already prepared. Together they drove to the maternity hospital because they were worried about their wife, daughter, and daughter-in-law. Shouldn't we have stayed home? Billy asked everyone. Were you home when I was in labor? Katie asked him, and then she hesitated, remembering why he had come to the hospital with them. You're right, we'll wait, he nodded. Everyone was sleep-deprived, yawning, Harry dozing at the wheel. Which one of you is the daddy? A nurse approached the car. Unfortunately, what? The young man didn't understand him. He had a massive heart attack. We were not able to save him, the doctor mumbled. He did not look into his son's eyes. That can't be, sat down and covered his face with his hands. Better go to your wife. She's having a hard time too, the doctor advised him. Billy remembered about Katie and rushed to the neighboring ward. She was lying on the bed. Some apparatuses were attached to her. Sweetheart, how are you doing? Asked her inconsolable husband. How is your father doing? She asked practically with only one lip. He's dead, he didn't think, and said Billy. At this point, Kathy felt so bad she couldn't contain herself. What did you say to her? At that moment, a nurse came running into the room. Sorry, the young man's eyes widened as he saw how bad his wife was feeling. He had been forced out of the room where labor had begun. Everyone feared a dire outcome because things were not going as well as they should have. What happened next, Billy didn't know. He didn't have the physical or emotional strength to bear it all. 2 people he loved dearly were now in the hospital, and one could no longer be saved. He was sedated and taken to a room to get some rest. Daddy, wake up. Billy felt himself being pushed. Oh yeah, he couldn't figure out where he was. Congratulations, you have a daughter. Only now you won't be able to see your wife or child, because both are in intensive care, the nurse stopped him at once. What about them? His mind cleared up immediately. He remembered last night. The woman had a cesarean, her blood pressure dropped and then went up a lot, and the baby is very weak, sick, she explained. Okay, Billy came to his senses completely. He decided that since there was no way to get to his wife and daughter now, he needed to take care of the father. He got ready, went home. His mother was in a state of distress. Where were you? Why didn't you answer the phone? What about Dad and Katie? She asked a lot of questions at once. She had circles under her eyes. It was obvious she hadn't slept. Mommy, sit down. He took her by the shoulders and put her in a chair. Woman tried not to listen to them. Yes, her life turned out the way it did, and she does not regret anything. Kolenka, run here. Ariana held out her hands to him when the boy began to run in the walker, and the boy ran to them. Now often the whole family vacationed here on their property, and everyone seemed to love each other. The one I thought was a poor kid turned out to be a millionaire, and the one I was sticking up for turned out to be a millionaire, Billy often said to Harry and Selena. Yes, it's interesting, you're my father and father-in-law, and Selena's father and father-in-law, Harry laughed. Billy had taught him a lot lately. Now the boy was doing as well as any businessman, but he still often turned to his father for help.